Hello and welcome to the Game Informer Show. I am your host, Ben Hanson, and I'm joined by my permanent co-host, Tim Turi, on the end there.
Hello.
And then we also have the beautiful Jeff Cork once more.
Hello.
We'll get him out of here next week. We promise. You just won't leave.
No, you won't.
That's true. And then we have Kyle Hilliard.
Oh, I don't get an adjective.
Welcome, Kyle.
Okay.
You like podcasting, right?
Yeah, I love podcasting.
Good.
I listen to a lot of them.
Oh, that's nice.
Including this one. I listened to the first episode.
That's very sweet. Now you
whole
can
the way through.
contribute to it.
Yes.
So we have a really fun show lined up. Big games out this week. We're going to be talking about Broken Age and State of Decay. Those are kind of the two headliners. We have some other stuff mixed in there. And then also in the second half of the show, after emails, which is going to be a returning segment, we have an interview with Dylan Cuthbert, which we're really excited to do. We haven't recorded it yet, but looking forward to talking to him about his days at Nintendo. He was a programmer on Star Fox, then he went on to found Q Games, and he's the president behind the company that's behind all of like the PixelJunk series and stuff like that. Now they're working on Tomorrow Children, so
Yeah, all that junk.
he's been around forever, and so
Yeah.
it's going to be a really fun chat.
It'll be
Looking
fun.
forward to it.
Yeah, I hope you guys don't blow it.
Thanks, Cork.
You're welcome.
Cork, why don't you tell us what you've been playing the last week?
What have I been playing the last week? I've
Yeah.
been playing a lot of State of Decay.
So this is the remastered
This is
Xbox One PC version.
The Year One Survival Edition.
What? Year one. Why? So like Batman? So this is like a prequel then? Is that what's going on with this?
I spoke to someone at Undead Labs, and they kind of looked at it as the zombie apocalypse. They just reset the clock, or in this case, the calendar year.
Okay. I thought I read something where it's like the year one naming came from like, it's like 1 year we survived after release or something like that, but it's been longer than that.
Yeah, it's been 2 years. So
It's a
they did
really-
the 2-year
it's-
survival edition.
the weirdest naming convention, I feel like.
Yeah,
Yes.
year 2 really sucks, but I think you get like a little ribbon if you survive a zombie apocalypse for 1 year, a little token. So I think that's what they're going for.
That's true.
So it's not the idea that that's the first year of the zombie outbreak. Like it's been going for a while in the sort of context of State of Decay.
I think in the beginning of the story mode, you kind of see the beginning of the outbreak.
Unless
right?
you went on a year-long camping or fishing trip with your buddy. Because remember,
That's right, that's
they come
what it
back
is.
to civilization, and then it's gone down.
Yeah. So Cork, you and I really loved this game
Yes.
when it came out back in 2013. I guess
Oh,
it was.
yeah, all those years ago. We've been on board since forever.
Oh yeah.
You
we're-
guys have had your personal ups and downs too.
Yeah.
Like between each other.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. But now we're back with this enhanced
It's
edition.
finally brought you guys back together.
Yep.
And so this version is just coming to, Xbox One. Microsoft published it, so it's not coming to PS4 anytime soon, certainly. But then it's also on PC. But this one like bundles all the DLC into it, which is like the Breakdown and Lifeline DLC.
Correct.
And just for a quick breakdown of the Breakdown.
Oh yeah.
Like
Break
that-
it down.
Yeah, the Lifeline DLC is another story component where you play as like from the military's perspective in
Yes.
like a new area. It's like a city. But I think both of us were a little bit underwhelmed by that. I only played like a couple hours myself.
Yeah.
And then I saw you were playing it today, actually.
Yeah. It's one of those. I never finished it, so that's what I'm going to do now.
Oh, cool,
I'm
cool.
going to finish it.
And you have to start over, right? Because you guys played the 360 version a ton, right?
You
There was
can
an
import your
import
save.
save. Yeah.
Oh, there is.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Which is really cool. So if you played it on 360, which you did back in the day, right?
Yeah,
Tim?
I did. So I saw the button, I'm playing it on Xbox One. It pops up. It says, hey, import 360 save. I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't know if it's saved in the cloud or what, but I'll hit this button and see what happens. And it couldn't find one. So I'm assuming you have to boot up your 360.
Yes.
Like
A new
peel,
option.
Peel back like the inch of like dust that's accumulated on it. Pray to the God that the one God that it actually starts up and then upload it to the cloud or something like that. I don't know.
I think there was an update with the 360 version where
Okay.
it says, do you want to export your save to the
Right.
cloud?
Okay.
Sure.
So did you take advantage of this quirk?
No.
Oh, okay.
You
'Cause
just
I treated this
fresh.
as year 0.
Nice.
Did either of you guys take advantage of it?
No, I didn't
Okay.
either because
'Cause
I'm mainly interested in like the breakdown component of the DLC, which strips all story stuff out of it and just kind of
Okay.
throws you into this. We should reset a little bit, but State of Decay is just like an open world zombie survival game, basically heavily
One player.
heavily dependent on like building up your community and building a base and trying to find resources and scavenging. Basically, you could see it as a baby version of DayZ, single player, I suppose.
Baby Daisy.
Baby Daisy.
Yeah.
But the Breakdown DLC is what I really like because like I played through a fair amount of the story content back in the old versions, but I never finished it.
Yeah.
I kind of lost steam with it at a certain point.
What does finishing State of Decay mean? Like, are there credits at the end of the story mode? I only played a little bit too, and then didn't understand what everyone was
That
saying.
has
in
a
it.
proper ending.
It does. And like the story, I mean, we were talking about playing Breakdown. You guys both recommended, both Cork and Ben recommended me playing Breakdown, skip the story mode. It seemed like the story was super bare bones anyway.
Yeah, it was just bare bones enough for my taste.
Okay. bare bones, like the bleached bones of a zombie-eaten corpse.
One of the front teeth missing.
Yeah, a crow flies off of it.
Tattered khaki shirt.
The words "game over" floating above it.
Yeah, so the story stuff, it's pretty simple.
No, that's the story.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like elaborate cutscenes or anything like that. Like when you're talking to everybody, it'll stay like a third-person camera and stuff like that. And I mean, you can understand why it's not that story dependent because it is permadeath for these characters. So even like theoretically the main character, the guy you start out with, like they can just go down and get eaten by a zombie, and then that character's gone forever. There's no loading your old saves or anything like that. It saves the second somebody goes down.
Yep.
So it's
Like
more
from software in that way, where it's just constantly, it's one save. Like you can't start over ever.
right.
That's exactly the same.
And that's what I really love about this game, and especially the Breakdown DLC, which I don't know if everybody likes as much as I do, but I just love having that pure experience. Just it all comes down to consequences.
So is there like a finite number of characters? Do you have lives, so to speak?
Well, yeah.
Or
I mean,
could you
it
just like
depends
keep dying and go through like 20 different randomly generated people?
No, because you recruit people and you find them in the open world to bring them back to your base.
right.
Is that like buying yourself lives in a game?
I guess you
where-
could see it that way. Like every person you put in your truck, it's like another coin in an arcade, I guess.
and then the more survivors you have, you're able to build to move into larger like home bases
Right.
that give you more spots for fortifications
Okay.
and that kind of thing.
and
So-
and things like workshops and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The bigger the base. That's another. Oh, go.
I'm sorry, and you're also able to switch between more characters, so you're not constantly fatigued and sick. And,
Because they will get winded and they need to lie down and rest for a while and
True.
stuff like that. But
I love when you're looking at like a character and it says what they were in the past life, where it's just like sick. It gets exhausted easily. Alcoholic, wants to drink all the time. Like it's just they're totally useless human beings.
yeah.
They're the ones that survived. They're the
Yeah.
ones that made it.
Somehow,
and now they're in charge of defending your base.
yeah. Essentially, God, what's his name? Danny McBride's character from This Is the End.
Oh, sure,
It's
yeah.
essentially that guy.
Yeah, I guess that.
Well, he succeeded pretty well in that film in terms of staying alive.
That's a good point.
So-
So, Cork, what's so appealing about this game? Because you have really gravitated towards this thing. And I know you like open world games in general, but what about this game has grabbed your attention?
I just like the pacing of it. I like that you have a lot of freedom in it. You know, there's a lot of stuff. I like the overriding goal rather of keeping a community safe,
Right.
or as best you can.
That can be an overwhelming goal too.
It's true, and it often is.
Yeah,
but there's a lot of priorities, and you have to juggle. You can't do everything.
Right.
So I kind of like that, like snap decision making. You're forced to do a lot of times.
And you
Yeah.
like Dead Rising a lot too. So I feel like I get that sense when I'm playing State of Decay that I got with Dead Rising, where it's like someone just coming over the radio where it's like, oh, I guess the opportunity to go help those people and maybe get some cool stuff is expired. You should do more of these. And I'm like trying to get, lumber so I can build a med bay thing. Not med bay. This isn't the Nostromo.
Right,
But,
some sort of medical facility.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I feel like the sense of like, God damn it, I'm not doing everything I should.
Yeah.
But you thrive in that?
I really enjoy it.
How? Why? What?
Yeah, I'm one of those guys that wants to help everyone.
Right,
Like
yeah.
even Majora's Mask, is like
Yes.
the idea that you can't literally help everyone is troubling to me.
Kyle,
I really like it.
you can't help everyone in the real world either.
I know. I try.
Let it go. It's not your fault.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I appreciate it, guys.
It's not your fault.
Try helping one person though.
Yeah.
I think I finally
Sorry,
saw like what the hook is in
Oh,
State
yeah.
of Decay though.
Okay, so last time, what kind of turned you off last time you tried playing this game?
Well, one, it is admittedly a really janky game.
Super janky.
Like,
And this
yeah.
version, it does not. It's
Yeah.
not suddenly a glossy thing.
Everything's pretty, but prettier, I should say.
Yeah.
But the frame rate really takes a hit.
Yeah.
Even on
and
Xbox One?
even on Xbox One. I mean,
Okay.
you can tell
Huh.
this game wasn't built with that platform in mind. But I mean, besides that, even just like, I don't want to get into too many of the complaints right away, but these are some of the things I think people will notice right away. But you run into your base, which is like the first community you find is like a basic house with sort of a stone wall around it, and there's like metal gates on either side of it. And
So hang on, just to be clear, you went to the southern base in Breakdown? Because in Breakdown, you could have your choice. It's just the first one you go to out of 3.
oh, okay. I went to the one that seems like it's just north of the little settlement there.
Okay, well, I think you start in a random spot on the map, too.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Well,
I started in the fairgrounds.
Oh,
I started in the
I'm-
middle of a lagoon.
I was south.
Okay.
very much south.
Right,
but,
right.
But anyway, so I'm in there, and like speaking to some of like the weird kind of buggy things, you can just be running in and be very carefully like, all right, I'm going to close the gate, and then the zombie will just like clip through the door. It seems like the zombies there are like, it's one of those things. I feel like we talked about this a little bit when we were talking about Bloodborne, where it's like you can be swinging, like an enemy can be swinging and like swing through a tree or a piece of the environment and hit you, but you can do that to them too.
Yeah.
And so it's pretty.
Right.
You have to learn sort of the weird janky rules that the game's setting up. And just like awareness and like line of sight and hearing and stuff, even though the minimap shows how much noise you're making, that stuff is really inconsistent in a way that almost plays well to the unpredictability of what surviving a zombie apocalypse
Sure.
would be
And they don't
like,
do a good
but-
job of like teaching you that you can do a finishing move by holding like, was it the run button and then melee?
They do say hold down in Xbox One's case LB and Y.
Okay.
But it's really inconsistent with like how far away should I be? Which one should I hit both of them at the same time?
They
And
have to
how
be
long do I-
down
and
before you can do it.
And you have to both be hitting like holding them down at the same time. It's a weird way to do an execution, but I should say that those executions are super brutal and awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, they get a little bit repetitive, but yeah.
I never had that problem of not knowing where, but
Not knowing where
to
like,
stand.
to
and all
pull
that
off
kind of stuff.
executions.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's something you really settle into as well.
Yeah.
But I did, I got much further than I did the first time when I was doing the story stuff.
Sure.
I focused on, the thing that really turned me off at first was sort of the base building side of it.
Yeah.
I didn't understand it. They throw the UI is not great. There's a lot of numbers and stats, and it's really dense right away. And sometimes even like, the prompt will come up and it's trying to explain something, but you were already hitting another button, so you accidentally just passed through this wall of text that was explaining how this system works. But
You got a little notebook. You can
yeah,
go
you
back
do.
to it.
You do. But you got to know how to page through to that and stuff. It's a lot to take in at first, but really once you
Yeah.
realize that like there's this influence system and these resources, whether it's fuel or ammo or lumber to build out the place, like you just realize that you're just spending different forms of currency and making everyone better and healthier through building out your base, and then you just keep on getting more stuff.
Yeah, it's a small detail, but I love the idea that the currency in this game is influence. Like
Yeah.
if you bring in just a boatload of resources, you will gain influence in your community.
Yeah.
It's a strange thing that I've never really seen in another game, but it's a detail that I love.
Yeah, it makes sense because it's like, all right, well, we trust you, so help yourself to the stash we already have.
Right.
And you consume influence too.
Right.
Like, it takes away from.
Yeah.
Right. If you
much you
take
have.
too much, then it's like, okay, this person's getting a little bit greedy.
Right.
But starting in Breakdown, I was in the middle of a swamp and I hadn't played this game for a while and I forgot how to run. And it started me right next to two zombies.
Nice.
And my character almost died because I was just trying to walk away, press every possible button combination to try and get away in time.
Is that typical? Like getting dropped like right into danger zone
In
like that?
Breakdown,
Okay.
it's like that's just where you start. But like if you
Okay.
spawn into the game, you'll always spawn into your home base. So it's not really.
I started next to some zombies too.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah.
Were you overwhelmed in the beginning?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's tough. And then it wasn't long until my first character died because he got winded as I was trying to make my way out of a barn to get back into my car, and he was like inches away from the car door, and then he just got taken down and ripped
really?
apart. And it's a brutal scene of just watching this character that you may have been leveling up the entire time just go down.
Well, that's the other thing is that it forces you to switch between characters because at a certain point your character just hits a wall. There's a day-night cycle and it's like you are fatigued. Your stamina is super important just as it is in any other game that's like where actions like running and swinging and hitting, like doing executions take stamina. Eventually, I guess this is a touchstone that we always lean on, but like a Dark Souls, your max stamina will decrease as you get more fatigued. So you actually have to go back to the base, rest up, and then get a new person out there, and they might not be as good as the person you were using.
Yeah, definitely. And you can go out and recruit more people, like we mentioned in the overworld map. And so, like, I picked somebody up, loaded them in the car, and then I was just hauling ass to get back to my home base. And I hit a hill, thinking like, oh, this will be a fun little jump to take. The car then flipped and like got wedged next to a fence.
Okay.
And it was slammed down. And so then I was crawling out of the car. My buddy was crawling out of the car. And of course, like all that noise made a horde of zombies come. And then they just ripped my buddy apart as I like limped away and like scattered across the cornfield.
At least one of us lived.
Yeah, it's just a lot of those very fun, just systemically driven, crazy moments that'll happen throughout this game.
I'll eat all your snacks and take all your morphine for you.
That's right. I'm going to come back for your satchel. But I love also just, there's something so fun about having a home base in an open world game. Especially with this one, like going out and scavenging at night is such a tense feeling to be wandering around this house. And then while you're scavenging, you can scavenge quicker but it'll be louder. So if you want to take that risk and just get the hell out of there, you can.
Can you tap the button to scavenge faster?
Yeah, you can do just a little bit if you hold the sprint button.
Yeah, but just praying that like the zombie walking by out the window isn't going to turn in, because like one zombie, it's like a good zombie movie. Like one zombie isn't a big deal, but you get to like 4 or 5,
right,
and it can get hairy. And then there's like special zombies, basically like a big bloater guy.
I rammed a juggernaut with my truck. The wheel fell off and it like started smoking. I'm just like, all right, I got this guy, because I was trying to like pick off this big juggernaut guy who's so annoying. He just like throws his dumb fat body against a window the entire time I was in this house. And so I got out and like, get into the truck. I'm like, all right, guy, I got you. And then I just floor it, and like I was like hitting a brick wall. Like he fell over, but yeah, the wheel fell off, and then I just shot him in the head a couple times. Those guys can take some damage.
You guys were battling one of those in the test chamber that you guys did, weren't you?
Yeah,
Just like Reiner just kept backing into it over and over, and just more zombies kept showing up, and he was just so intent on killing this huge fat zombie, and it just like totally put him in this dangerous situation where he was just surrounded by zombies.
Yeah. There's also kind of like banshee zombies that'll scream and attract other zombies towards them, and then kind of stun you with their scream as well. And then there's like, are they called hunters? They kind of like guys who are kind of on all fours and are super quick.
Ferals.
Yeah. Oh my god. And you have to like clear out infestations that are some of these special zombies, and they're like marked on the map, and they can be really brutal.
Jeff, is the idea that infestations spread? Like it will infested house. Like what is the incentive for clearing that out?
It also lowers morale if there's a lot of them around.
Oh, really?
Home base. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, people don't like that.
No, probably not.
I think the thing that I like most about the game, though, is going back to that, is like the zombie trappings. I can take it or leave it.
Sure.
To be fair, I really like games where you have a home base that you can upgrade, and that's a huge component if you want to succeed in State of Decay. And I really enjoyed that. I think it's handled really well once you figure out how to navigate through the menus, because it's better in the Year 1 Survival Edition. They've kind of streamlined things a bit, but it still takes some getting used to.
Yeah.
Is Breakdown just as long as you can survive?
Yeah.
Like,
and I think it ratchets up the difficulty throughout the course. Like you'll reach certain milestones, then it'll bump it up a notch.
Yeah, because like unlike the first time I played it, the game's been out long enough that I don't feel like this is a spoiler. And Breakdown's so just sort of open anyway.
Yeah, you're fine.
But I repaired an RV. And that, well, actually, it's one of the first goals I give you is like, we need to repair this RV. And I didn't get to that point in the original game if that wasn't even an option. But I got it, all set up. I had like a lot of resources. I was feeling really good. And then it asked me to select who I wanted to bring in the RV. It seemed like it was a limited amount of spots that I had to bring into the next zone. So does that mean that the other people are just gone after that point? You have to choose the cream of the crop, and then the sick and tired are just left to die in our old abandoned house?
Yes. Danny McBride's.
You could just pretend they went to a farm.
Okay. Because I actually went to a farm right after that.
Okay.
Literally. So
they did not go to the same farm.
Okay, no. So they're just done then, right? But all your resources carry over into the new area once you move and pick up shop?
I think that's the way that works.
And you can never go back, right? Because I'm assuming you can never go backwards, right? Like to a previous area that you were in.
I mean, you can always travel over there. I don't think you can have more than one big base.
No, you can establish a home base, I think, once every 48 hours in real time or 24 hours or something.
Is it all one big map?
Yeah.
Like it is. Okay, so I just moved. We took the RV to like a different part of the map essentially. That would have been really hard to get to.
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember debating this game with Joe Juba years ago on the podcast, on this very podcast, because he reviewed it for us and he wasn't the biggest fan. Like I don't think he had a character die, and he wasn't really impressed by the story mode or anything like that. But I remember like describing what had happened to me in this game and how much fun it is to build up a base in this open world zombie survival horror game. And he had a very good point where he said, Hanson, if what you're describing is actually the game, this would be the greatest game of all time. And it is not that.
No, it's not.
It's a very janky version of that. And it's like, there's a lot of like textures repeating. It's not the prettiest thing. And it has some rough edges for sure, but like, those certain moments, like this is the game I've always wanted.
Yeah. I mean, you have to be so in love with the concept. You know? And I think that there's an element of that going on with like when DayZ was originally an Arma mod. It was the same thing. Like, well, we don't really have a lot of options in this like this exact hardcore zombie survival like situation. But one thing I wanted you guys to explain to me too, that another element of the game I don't really get is there's some persistent elements. Like I turned off my Xbox One last night. I had a good deal of supplies for everybody. I'm held up in some restaurant called the Alamo, right next to a grocery store. It seems like a good setup right now. But what's going on while I'm not playing?
I think your influence slowly erodes.
Okay.
And I think you go through supplies as well.
Really?
I don't know what the rate is, but yeah, there is some stuff that happens that way.
I mean,
Your characters rest.
What's the longest gap that you've had between like, intense sessions with that game?
Oh, geez. It's probably been like weeks or something like that. It's not like Animal Crossing where everything's covered with weeds.
Okay.
There's cockroaches everywhere.
There's a sloth trying to prod you into
Yeah.
picking them out. So you
You
never
miss
felt
Santa.
You never felt punished for coming back to the game
No.
after a couple weeks?
No.
All right.
This is kind of a tangent, Cork. Did you play Valley of the Yetis, the Far Cry 4 DLC?
No.
Because a big component of that is like building out a base.
Well,
to take
Oh,
on.
really?
Yeah.
Then.
To take because every couple of main story missions, waves of enemies come at you, and you have to like set up traps around your base, and you have to build it up and stuff like that. So
Are these enemies Yetis?
you should play that. There are some Yetis in there. Yeah.
Okay.
Later in the game.
Okay, so yeah, I wanted. This is totally tangential, but I was really curious about that Far Cry Yeti thing, and like, is how crazy does it get with Yetis?
There's quite a few like story missions with Yetis where you have to fight Yetis, and then there's I think I ran into 6 just walking around.
How long
out in
did
the
you
wild.
play?
I mean, I beat it. I played it all the way through.
How long did you play it?
5 hours maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty standard DLC.
All right.
It's like 1.1 Yetis per hour.
Yeah. Well, the coolest thing was
YPH.
It takes a little while to see a Yeti, but I saw one out in the wild before I saw the cutscene with the Yeti. So I was just driving along and I was like, oh man, that soldier looks big.
Yeah.
That's a really tall soldier. And I just kind of drove by him and I was like, oh, that was a Yeti.
Was he wearing a little soldier's cap?
No, he was just a naked furry guy.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah,
okay.
so-
Can you make anything out of their skins?
No, you can skin them though. You just get
Right.
money for it though.
Just bait.
Yeah, that'd be cool if you could just make a coat.
Yeah,
just an
that'd be
oversized
awesome.
coat.
Harry, dressed up like Harry from Harry and the Hendersons.
Yes.
Perfect. Oh, Dan Aykroyd. So, Cork, do you remember when we were on the Far Cry 4 trip and the big question we kept asking them, and I feel like the team up there gets asked this all the time, is like, are you guys doing Blood Dragon 2? What's your game plan with that? And
Yeah.
they're like, oh, it's going to be surprising. This is going to be a doozy. And I don't know if anybody's talked to them recently about if they're still going to make a big standalone DLC in the vein of Blood Dragon, or if that Yeti DLC, that was our wacky thing.
Yeah, that's our weird offshoot one. Look at
In terms of size, it is comparable to Blood Dragon.
And
It's a pretty chunky DLC. There's a lot to do. There's a full story in there.
Is it a new map? I can't remember.
Yeah. It's you kind of get this whole. It's I think in the review, I even kind of called it it's mini Far Cry 4. It's kind of you kind of have a lot of the same missions and stuff that you can do, but it's a smaller map.
That sounds good, actually.
Yeah, it's cool. If you guys like Far Cry 4, I would recommend it for sure.
Yeah.
But it's not on par with where Blood Dragon just felt like a completely different game. This feels like a miniature Far Cry 4 with this supernatural element that's kind of just sort of tossed in a little bit. It doesn't infect the whole DLC.
Yeah.
Which is I think the right choice, because then they're you don't see them very often. It kind of makes them more mystical.
So you're saying that Yetis are supernatural, Kyle? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, that's how I feel about it. Do you guys know?
What are you talking about?
It's not like they cast magic
Yetis aren't
spells.
real.
Well, just because they're not real doesn't mean they're
Jane Goodall believes in them, Kyle. How supernatural can they be?
Wait, Jane
Actually,
Goodall
Cork,
believes in
Yeah,
Yetis?
totally. Yeah.
What?
Wait,
Yeah.
what?
Jane
Talk
Goodall.
about that for 20 minutes?
She has talked. She's come out again and again saying, "I totally believe that Bigfoot exists. Bigfoot and Yetis."
in present tense.
Present tense. Yeah.
Like a single very evolved ape
Or
that's
big
not
feet.
quite a human. That's just hanging
Yeah,
out.
its name is Nuck Nuck, and she's communicated with it.
She lived with him for 3 years.
No,
There's
but
a
I think-
documentary about it.
I think she's just overwhelmed. Jane Goodall minute. I think she's overwhelmed by how much we don't know about nature, and so
Okay.
I think just one of those things that she just said a long time ago. Yeah, totally, I could see Sasquatch existing,
Okay.
and now every interview she does, hey, Jane Goodall, any updates on Sasquatch?
We should try to get her on the podcast. That could be the
great
second
point.
segment.
Yeah.
But so the Yetis, are they kind of like Sasquatch in Red Dead's DLC? That's the obvious
Sad
comparison. I
sex.
think.
Yeah.
Sad Squatch.
God, yeah, that was a weird part of that DLC. No, they don't talk to you and tell you really sad stories.
Okay.
And there's no cutscene. I don't remember exactly what happened, but I remember it being depressing.
Yeah.
But they're just really strong enemies that the only way to kill them is you have to break them down, and then you can jump on their back and stab them to death.
Cool. Hey, speaking of survival, whatever happened with you, Tim, and Dying Light? I feel like you missed
hell.
the boat on that, and then you tried to catch up.
No, I played it when it came out. Well, no. Oh, Monster Hunter, I think, maybe set me back a while. And I had
Okay.
I was traveling a ton, so I had
Yeah.
to catch up with Dying Light after the fact. And then Bloodborne happened later and slammed stuff like Axiom Verge and Ori and Dying Light just totally off to the sidelines. And on the other end of Bloodborne, I actually finished up Ori. I haven't gone all the way back to Dying Light, but like Dying Light's a cool game.
Okay, so you were enjoying the time you're spending with it because we kind of see you as our zombie expert in the office.
Oh, okay. Well, gotcha. I mean, is it all like the weapons in my trunk? Is that what you're saying? Like,
and your dumb zombie T-shirt you're wearing right now.
Oh, okay.
Stuff like that.
I don't think it's dumb, Tim.
Oh, well, thanks. So anyway, I really want to talk about my dumb zombie T-shirt now. No, Dying Light is really cool. I mean, I'm surprised that people didn't talk more about it because it just played so well. It was like taking the essence of Dead Island and being like, all right, everyone saw the potential of Dead Island. It's like, well, what if they had more maybe time and polish and like they mixed that with way better movement and mobility like Mirror's Edge, and I don't know. I really liked it. It started to do that thing with me like that Far Cry 4 did towards the end, where it's like, okay, all right, I'm ready for this to be over. We did the thing where you took my weapons away. Okay, now I got them back, and it starts to get kind of predictable at a certain point, but the moment to moment of like just cruising through the city, and then like once you survive your first night from like beginning to end, as the zombies get stronger and you get more experience, it's really
co-op
fun.
is really great too.
Yeah, I didn't dig into any of the co-op yet.
Yeah.
You really liked it?
Yeah, it's super fun.
Okay.
I heard a lot of Far Cry comparisons to Dying Light.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I like Far Cry 4 a lot, and I would be up for more of that.
You should play Dying Light.
Did you ever play as the zombie? Because I tried that a little bit, and it seemed pretty cool. Like you're using like his tongue, and almost like a grappling hook.
I did do it once. You kind of like feel like Venom or something like that.
Yeah.
You're using your own momentum to like you basically like sling weird zombie webs around, and then you're like zooming up, and then you'll look at the side of the top of a building and then hit it, and then you'll sling up, and then you'll just try to kind of keep your momentum going as you like sling in front of you, and then just kind of keep it rolling, and then pounce on someone, get the hell out of there. It feels like you're an amped up hunter from Left 4 Dead, basically.
Right.
Yeah. It's cool.
Yeah.
I didn't get super into that, but
Okay.
I like the single player stuff a lot.
I also never heard. Sorry, more zombie time. But I never heard your final thoughts on Revelations 2.
Oh yeah. I thought Resident Evil Revelations 2 was really cool. Did you guys play any of it at all?
I'm nearing the end of episode 2.
Okay. I mean, Resident Evil Revelations came out the same year as Resident Evil 6.
Sure.
And everyone was super surprised. It's like, oh wow, like this 3DS game actually ended up being better than the proper, console version. I think that Revelations is a little bit better than 6, even though I do like 6.
Yes.
Yeah, send your thoughts on Resident Evil 6 to podcast@gameinformer.com. But anyway, 2 is really strong in some areas. Like the storytelling is a lot better. And if you're a fan of like Barry Burton from Resident Evil, like I am, like Barry was. I've talked about this before, but one of my favorite things about Revelations 2 is that they took Barry, who was liked for all the wrong reasons that a game developer would maybe want him to be liked.
He's an underdog, but also you can laugh at him.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
but also because like the voice acting was so terrible,
Sure.
And so there's this sort of dopey dad character that came through there where he's like, oh, this acid rounds are really, really powerful, especially against living things. Take them with you. And it's like, oh, Barry, don't you need them to protect yourself? Oh, I've got this. And he just lifts. It's just so dopey. The combination of like the awkward, stilted animations from the PlayStation 1 mixed with the bad voice acting really sold it. And, I remember having a conversation with I think the director of Resident Evil Revelations 1 when that game was getting kind of ramped up. And I was like, where's Barry? I didn't even mean to do that. I'm like, Barry, where's Barry? And they're like, actually, this is a tough one to ask the developers because they don't have a firm, total, complete understanding of why he's so popular in the West because there's a language barrier and translation, literally lost in translation. And then they figured it out. They figured it the hell out with Revelations 2, where it's like the voice actor's dead on, the look of like, a Barry that's like, I don't know, like 10 years older, maybe 15 years older.
Sure.
And his arc with like just trying to find his daughter. It's really interesting as a fan, and it's probably the best Resident Evil story that's happened in a while.
Do you play as Barry at all?
You do.
Yeah,
You
okay.
play him for half the game.
Oh, okay.
I mean, the way Revelations 2 worked is that like Barry and Claire are the gun-toting characters, and then Claire's partnered with Moira, which is Barry's daughter, and she has like this kind of secondary role where she can like stun zombies with a flashlight and cave their skulls in with a crowbar.
She's got a wicked sense of humor.
She
too,
does. She says, "What the cock?" and stuff like that. She's pretty cool. But oh my God, that's right. I forgot about one scene from that game. Towards the end, there's a boss battle. I won't give you the specifics, but they took what to me was one of like I'm not saying the Resident Evil series is rife with emotional moments, but they took what I think is maybe the most emotional moment in the entire series, and it was something involving Moira and her past, and they handled it in this interesting way, and then they just killed that with the worst one-liner. And it's just the way that they complemented each other. You got to play through Revelations 2 to understand what I'm talking about, and people that played it know what I'm saying. But other than that, the game is cool.
Yeah.
Some of the puzzle designs and stuff and encounters were kind of like they got old, but I actually ended up gameplay wise having the most fun with raid mode, which is just
interesting. Okay,
it's like the most video game. It's just like the kind of mercenaries mode from Resident Evil 4 and 5 music starts playing. It's like that dancey kind of music, and you're just shooting waves of zombies, and it's got like the numbers popping above their head to show your damage. You get stronger and play co-op with a friend.
Nice. I might have to check that out because I've been playing co-op with a friend of mine just throughout the campaign, and for some reason I thought, it'll be fun if I'm Moira and Natalia, like the two weaker characters going through.
Right.
But that gets really boring, especially Natalia, who literally can only point
and throw a brick.
She can throw a brick, but if you walk through a door carrying the brick disappears.
The interesting stuff that happens with Natalia later is that there are invisible enemies.
Right.
And only she can see them. So, when you're playing single player, like you have to switch to her to be the spotter and then kind of like switch to Barry, and like a little bit of time has passed. So you have to be like, all right, well, it was heading in that direction. So got to correct my aim a little bit. I can only imagine that's more fun with two people playing
for sure.
spotter, but don't ask me about Resident Evil on this podcast because it will just turn into a Resident Evil podcast.
Yeah, don't worry. We'll never do that again. Jeff Cork, what else have you been playing, buddy?
I feel like that's it.
State of Decay.
Maybe some Broken Age?
Yeah, you
maybe?
reviewed Broken Age, for Christ's sake.
That was a while ago, though.
Yeah, I guess it feels like a while ago because we got that code relatively early, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Act 2 just came out on Tuesday, and the entire package is released on PlayStation 4 and every console known to man, I think including Ouya even.
Well, but not Xbox.
No.
So
that's
just
true.
PS4 and Vita
That's true.
and Ouya.
Yeah.
So
And
every
PC.
console.
And
known to
iOS,
man.
Oh, okay, nice.
which is strange. But you really liked Act 2.
Yeah, I loved it. And we should be clear, the whole Act 1, Act 2 is this super gross thing that was just a function of how the game was developed and kickstarted, because it's not like there's any Act 1, Act 2 when you're playing it. It's seamless when you
They even do some recap and stuff, like, or not real recap, but they're just like they show like the very last moments of the game from Act 1 and then flows into 2.
Are you playing on PC?
Yeah.
Okay, because like when I played Act 1 on PC, but then when the new one came out, I started playing it on Vita, and there's no distinction between like it's just one full complete game. So I actually had to replay through Act 1.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Maybe,
so I'm playing on PS4 and it's the same thing.
actually,
PC is probably a little different.
You know, I think it must have been a cloud save thing or something I didn't realize was
maybe.
happening.
Yep.
Because I picked up right where Act 1
And I
left
was
off.
that's
actually
interesting.
I was disappointed at first that I had to play through Act 1 again because I thought they would break it up, for people like me who wanted to switch consoles. But it's a point and click game, so you actually breeze through it really fast because you kind of remember the puzzles. If you remember. So, and I actually ultimately am really happy that I replayed the whole thing because I got the full recap, and it's made like diving into Act 2 like a lot more exciting.
Yeah, for sure.
Also, I just want to for people that are listening or watching and maybe doing so with some trepidation, we're not trying to spoil anything here.
We're not going to spoil.
We will try
the end of Act 1.
Well, we'll try to be careful about that. But
but I'm also glad I replayed Act 1. I was in the exact same boat as you, where it's like, oh man, I remember some of these teleportation puzzles being a real pain in the ass, but going through it really wasn't as bad as I remembered. And also playing on the PS4, I don't know, maybe it's just a difference of being relaxed and laying back on my couch versus like playing on my PC, on my laptop and whatnot. But I really had a good time with Act 1, and I felt like it was nice because I vaguely remembered enough of the puzzles to feel like it was still fresh though, and it felt like I was just a smart person going through it for the first time compared to a dumb person going through it for the first time. You're like, this is impossible. How do you get Shay off this train? What in God's name?
On the flip side, I read the Wikipedia plot summary and just picked up where it left off. And I felt totally fine.
Did you? I feel like there's some jokes though that I definitely would have forgotten about that they pick up in Act 2 and it's like, holy cow, like there's a whistle. And it's like I would have been so confused about what that whistle was about if I did not just play that. And also like
I did forget about that.
And it is really fun just like seeing those characters continue on like right after you left them off. like especially like the talking tree in Act 1, who I thought was really funny, and also like the druids.
Woodsmith too.
Yeah, the woodcutter, and like the druids are probably my favorite characters. Like the guard that's at the Deadeye God.
Oh, the blind
temple, like the two blind girls. I love them, and like seeing them continue directly into Act 2's events. Loved it. That's probably the highlight of the game so far for me. But Cork, so what was it about Act 2 that really? Because I know you're bothered by the weird division, but I noticed that like you gave Act 1 like an 8.75, and then Act 2 you gave like a 9.25.
Yeah.
So what stood out so much for it? I
just like the continuation of the story. I really like the characters, and God, without spoiling stuff, it's tricky.
It's tough.
I like how this is like worthless without spoiling. I like how things continued in a direction that I.
So yeah, without spoiling anything, I mean, it's fair to say that there are some recycle environments in Act 2, and I was actually pretty worried about that going into things. Just because I thought it was an interesting point. We both just played through Grim Fandango, actually, and in one of the commentary tracks for Grim Fandango, Tim Schafer's talking about how they've really had to think a lot in adventure games, like what's worthwhile and what's the reward for pushing forward. And it's like, well, in an RPG, you have some level of progression. In a shooter, you're like trained and you feel better over time just with your twitch reflexes. But with an adventure game, like what is there that's the reward for pushing forward? And he said that the only conclusion the team could come up with was new environments, like seeing the art in the next area, meeting new characters, has to be enough of a reward.
But just, I mean, does story just fall under
I guess, yeah. I guess there's also the story thing or whatever. But that's what has me worried about Act 2, because it's like, oh, it seems like this is just going to be a lot of the same environments.
I think what I had your same worries, I think, especially considering like, you and I have both watched the most. You're completely caught up. I'm one episode behind on the entire Double Fine Adventure 2-player productions documentary, which if you like Double Fine and Tim Schafer and stuff, like it's the best video game documentary that's ever been made, I think.
Hands down. And just for a quick side note, like I'm a backer of this game for all disclosure and whatnot, primarily for that documentary series.
Right.
And I cannot rave about that enough. And the fact that Double Fine and 2-player, the video team, that they're giving those episodes away for free on YouTube under Double Fine's YouTube account, it is insane because it is such an impressive level of production going throughout that entire thing. It is the best look at game development you will ever see in a documentary form. Like to think of it just as like, oh, Double Fine's Dev Diaries or something. It's like, no. This is amazing access to every argument, every debate, like the highs and lows of this entire game's production. It is fascinating. I cannot recommend it enough. And like judging from the views on YouTube, not enough people are watching that thing, especially getting all the way through it.
What kind of time commitment are you looking at?
There's 19 episodes. They average probably altogether maybe like 35 minutes an episode.
Okay.
Is probably the average one.
They go fast though. They're really, really entertaining, and Tim Schafer's funny. The people at Double Fine are interesting. Like I don't like to refer to them as characters because these are real people, but they're funny. They're talented. They have interesting backgrounds that you can get into with their side quest type stuff.
It's such a surreal thing to have that access to that documentary, but then also all the rest of the video work that 2-player is doing at Double Fine, and feel like I have a pretty good idea of every employee of Double Fine. And it was just a surreal feeling then when I visited. We shot a video about Massive Chalice real quickly on the tail end of like our Advanced Warfare cover story trip, and like walking into the halls of Double Fine, then being like, oh, I know so much about every person here, and they don't know that I do, and it's a weird feeling.
Just staring at people and giggling quietly.
There was a weird moment for me too, because I visited the Double Fine office to get like actual like the first press like hands on with Broken Age, and then I was like on the way there where I realized like, oh my god, like this is important for us for coverage. Like it must be important for them for the like the development cycle of the game. Like, are they gonna ask me to be? Then they're like, yeah, can we mic you up and you have to be on this documentary because we're trying not to turn the cameras off for anything. It's like okay. So if you watch it, like my dumb face actually shows up in there, and that was a weird.
So you didn't know in advance, like it was like literally like walking up into the office. You're like, oh
I didn't know. I didn't know that far in advance. I don't remember exactly how it shook out, but
But that was a surreal moment from my perspective because it was like watching really my favorite web series. This is the Double Fine Adventure. But it was like watching like Mad Men, and suddenly, oh, then Tim Turi is going to be on Mad Men this episode. It's like, holy cow. And you get to see like them getting ready for that demo.
That was bizarre.
And then like the aftermath of after you left, and then like them reading your article and like we can see the magazines that we ship them. It is a weird perspective.
It is one of the weirdest things that's ever happened to me in my career, and it's captured forever. And it was really bizarre. But it's aside from that little quirky, anecdote, it's really worth watching. But the reason I brought that up is because we've watched those, and you become so familiar with the environments and like the character models and stuff just through watching that I wondered if maybe going back to these environments in Act 2, I'd feel like the sense of like fatigue with it. But the way that you return to some characters in some areas, like it's so just enough time for me has passed that it feels almost like, it's like new again to me, and they have fun twists on stuff.
Yeah, it's remixed in a way where it's still entertaining. It carries over the affection you have for the characters without being like, this effing guy again.
Right.
And no one has like loops that they just keep saying. Like, oh, that's the guy that just tells me that one thing. Like as you progress, people change and say different things and add to the story in meaningful ways.
So far.
Cork, I'm curious, do you go to new areas eventually? Is this just kind of the early stages of Act 2 where it's the same environments?
Yeah, you definitely go to new stages.
Okay, can you give like a percentage? Is it a majority new areas, would you say?
I wouldn't say it's the majority.
Okay.
But yeah, there are definitely new areas.
Okay. And then going right from Act 1 to Act 2, other things that stood out to me is like, maybe it's just because I've heard Act 1 before, but I think Act 2 is funnier so far. Like I found myself laughing several times out loud going through it, whereas the first one's like, there are a couple funny moments. I remember that knife joke really got me, and a couple other key moments in Act 1.
Yeah.
But in Act 2, it's really, really standing out to me.
Yeah, it's very funny.
Yeah, it turns out it's pretty fun. Are there any, I don't know, there's something that maybe, again, just because I've seen so much of the documentary, rewatch those episodes again and again, but something that always bothers me is I think it's a cool art style and I like the look of the game, but just seeing like, when it's the wide shot, I think it looks great. But when they zoom in for cutscenes, you can see like the layers that aren't the characters in the background. They look like the text or like the resolution is just too low, and it's like it's just not made for those kinds of close-ups, and it's really distracting to me. And it drives me nuts.
That tree in particular that you're talking about, every time they zoom in that tree, you can see the sort of pixelation, and then Shay or Bella, whoever, like looks fantastic. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, they look great at any angle, but then not like zooming in on the tree. I think I even took a screen grab on my Vita because I was like, this looks kind of rough.
It does. It's not made for
Does
that.
it bother you when like the grandfather's eye patch switches like eyes depending on which way he's facing?
Oh, does it really?
Correct.
I guess I never noticed that.
I mean, it's part of the idea is that they want it to look painterly. And, the closer you look at a painting, the more you can see sort of the strokes and like the texture of like the paint. And like, that's kind of how it comes across to me a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be apologetic for it, but like, I do agree that the wide shots look way better.
Sure.
In the same way that, stepping away from a painting.
I think it's in much the same way that watching a zombie walk through a solid wall in State of Decay doesn't make me want to turn my system off in anger.
Yeah, certainly.
Because I'm having fun.
Yeah.
I'm able to look past certain things. I think I definitely noticed that when it's zoomed in extremely closely, things are a little blurry.
Yeah.
But
It doesn't hurt the
doesn't
characters or
bother
the
me.
story.
The game,
Yeah, it's just a little distracting.
and really when that game is like visually firing on all cylinders, it looks like nothing else.
Yeah.
Like it's really impressive.
How many times have you gotten stuck so far, Kyle?
Through Act 1, I got stuck maybe, like, actually there's only one puzzle with Vela that really got me stuck for a while. And then in Act 2, we actually were talking about this puzzle that involves a knot that kind of, I got stuck a little bit on.
And even when you figure out what to do, it's still kind of a pain in the
Yeah.
ass to get through.
I've heard you guys talking about this infamous knot.
Yeah, it's,
I'm sure it gets worse,
It's actually
but-
one of those things. After I completed it, I figured out I was actually doing it the hard way. There's an easier way to do it. There's like a dialogue option that you need to pick that speeds up the pace of solving the puzzle. It's weird to be super vague about this, but I was skipping that dialogue prompt and walking back and forth more than I needed to.
And one of the big talking points for the documentary too was a lot of the feedback that they got from the hardcore fans in episode 1 is that it was too easy. And I love the difficulty of Act 1. Like I got stuck a couple times. I'm really stupid, as I mentioned several times.
We know.
Yeah, that's right. But they said that they really wanted to ratchet that up for Act 2. Did you notice that the puzzles are more difficult overall?
I'd say they're more complicated.
Okay.
Like there are more steps involved in solving them. You'll see later on. There are a couple that are like multi-phase puzzles, which people are either going to really appreciate them or they're just going to be turned off. I don't think there's going to be people that are just like, whatever.
Yeah.
was one thing you mentioned where in Act 1 you can take Vela's story and Shay's story and just complete them completely separately.
Correct.
But in Act 2 there are certain occasions where you have to switch back and forth to solve puzzles.
Yeah, because there's like a clue in one person's reality that you need to solve a puzzle in the others. It's kind of a weird thing.
Did they give you a heads up?
No.
That sounds rough.
So I should just start kind of sporadically when I get a natural point. And a point like a break between areas, maybe I should try switching back and forth.
Because I didn't switch back and forth at all for Act 1.
Yeah, I don't like
I didn't
to
either.
Yeah.
Something that was really cool about the if you play it with a controller on PC or on like the PlayStation systems, you can use the right stick and it'll immediately zoom to different points of interest. So it's not like a lot of puzzle games or adventure games where you're constantly looking around like, what am I supposed to be interacting with? So I mean, that's super helpful, I think.
It really is, yeah. Like going through Act 1 again. The first time I played through it, I completely missed picking up the knife in the kitchen, and like you can just walk in there and kind of scan around with the right stick and see every object that you're capable of interacting with, which does really help. Or even like I forgot to pick up the icing, like whipped cream gun in that one room. I just had no idea, and so it does help with that. But
you know, I think on PC, and maybe Tim, you can confirm. There's like a little eyeball in the top right corner. It's certainly on Vita, where you can tap this little like translucent eyeball in the top right corner and it highlights everything that can be interacted with too.
I don't know.
Okay. I can't remember if that was in the PC version or not.
Are you using it like a touch screen?
Yeah, I'm using the
Vita?
touchscreen on the Vita.
Okay.
It's weird. I kind of keep going back and forth because I can't make up my mind. But it works well.
I kind of wish I had direct control every once in a while playing on PS4 because you just have to scroll with the little cursor and tap where you want to walk. And it's annoying that like it's nice that you can use the right stick to kind of jump around to the different objects. But then at the same time, if the screen has to scroll before you get to the edge, you don't really know, so you still have to kind of scroll the screen manually before you can double tap to then jump to the next screen.
Well, I'm playing on PC, but with a Xbox 360 controller,
Right.
And I just use the left analog stick and use it like it's a mouse cursor.
Yeah.
Right, that's what it is.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, you can do either way.
Okay, I thought you were talking about like jumping, like it automatically jumps, like hops
That's
between.
the right stick does
Yeah,
that.
the right stick will do that.
That sounds like it could be kind of weird.
But like we said, it helps to find out some hidden objects, or objects you wouldn't think of interacting with.
That's a good point.
Yeah, or like, oh, I know that Vela can talk about this bird because that's an option to be highlighted. Little stuff like that. I guess that helps out.
One thing playing Broken Age makes me kind of miss, I guess, because Double Fine is moving so far away from doing like a whole studio focused game with like a core narrative. Like I actually don't really have a lot of affection for like classic LucasArts point and click. Like the first time I played Monkey Island was the 360 remakes.
Yeah, me too.
And I love Psychonauts and I love Brutal Legend, and playing Broken Age makes me want more of just like Tim Schafer just like writing a full story and rather than like you know how they're breaking off and doing those small projects.
Sure.
I wish Double Fine could just focus on one big project, because I feel like Broken
Forget about
Age is
big project. It just feels like you want like a 3D character driven game again.
Yeah, I guess so. Like I want that from Double Fine. Like you know, even like everyone always talks about Psychonauts 2, which would be fantastic. I would love that. But
If not,
you
to
know.
just whip out his checkbook for Christ's sake.
Come on, man.
Come
what is he
on.
doing? Just buying candy for his candy thing in his
Candy
house.
Palace.
Candy Palace.
And
Not
so that's
his
just
Candy
because you
Palace.
don't really like adventure games too much, and you're just squeezing the Double Fine humor out of this adventure
Yes,
game.
Yeah, I mean, I would be happy to have like another. I just want another big Double Fine project. You know, like I don't know if we're ever going to see another big Double Fine project, or if it's just going to be a lot of smaller projects.
Well, this one took 3 years, Kyle. So
Hey, it's worth the wait.
But at the same time, it seems like they're a developer that's like not interested in putting all their eggs in one basket anymore.
I just want them to take that risk for my benefit.
I
Right, we
do
all
too.
understand
I do
that, Kyle.
too.
That makes sense.
Maybe that'll happen. I mean, think about new announcements. Like it seemed like forever that there was just crazy side projects coming out. You know, the Amnesia Fortnite sort of like 2-week game jam thing that they do.
also
would
another
happen.
great video series. But
Yeah, really good. And then they'd spin those off into other side games. But now
Right.
I'm trying to think about it. Like, so Broken Age is out. They have Massive Chalice is nearing completion.
the kind of XCOM medieval.
Yeah.
And then they just shipped Grim Fandango, which, by the way, the puzzles in Broken Age are such a sigh of relief after Grim Fandango, because we were on the podcast. I wanted to really love Grim, and I did at that time. But going through it again, man, great story. The world's like probably my favorite video game world, and those puzzles suck. But anyways, and then they're also doing the Day of the Tentacle remake for Sony as well.
That's right. So I mean, but besides that, new projects, like there was a time that I couldn't keep up with what Double Fine was doing. And
Right.
now it seems like it's starting to pare down, and maybe there'll be something like exciting, something that will get you excited, Kyle. I don't know.
Almost kind of wish like they would never do this, but I almost kind of wish like Sony would just buy Double Fine and just like fund them and let them do what they want. You know what I mean? Like that's not going to happen. But
I wish that my car was made out of licorice.
oh yeah, I wish Double Fine just had a crap ton of money. That would be amazing.
And that's, I mean, going back to the documentary series, because I'm a little bit obsessed with it, that is one of the most fascinating things, is just seeing Double Fine get very specific about, like, we have exactly this much money left. Like, we cannot afford to pay these people. We need this amount to come in. We need to try and find ways to make that money. And it's like, Brutal Legend releases on PC. All right, we made $800,000 and 50 cents off of that. That will help fund us for another 2 months with this project. Like, if you ever want to know how tough it is to make a game financially, creatively, just trying to schedule this thing out, especially a Kickstarter project.
Right.
Again, I cannot recommend that documentary enough.
Or you can just complain at Tim Schafer on Twitter too. Somebody was like, they said something like, "Hey, how could you guys have all this money? Why is Broken Age breaking so long?" And Tim Schafer replied in like 6 tweets of like, "This is exactly
That's
how
right.
much everything costs. This is payroll, et cetera, et cetera."
And Cork, I'm going to just constantly harass you about watching the documentary now that you've like played the entire game.
Yeah, I think I will now that it is like reviewed.
Yeah.
I honestly was staying away from it largely
Yeah.
because I didn't want to have any of that in my mind.
I think that's a totally fair tactic.
What's a good
for
question?
sure.
Actually, are there spoilers in that documentary?
No, I mean,
I've watched
Just
some
like
of it.
locational.
once Act 1 came out, they spoiled the ending of Act 1, but they blur out a lot of things. So they're going to be releasing like the unblurred version, which will be filled with spoilers coming up soon for like the final release. I think that's probably the one they're going to press to Blu-rays and whatnot.
Oh, I'll probably just wait till that.
Okay,
I
yeah.
should put on Netflix.
Yeah, I would definitely
cool.
agree. But instead they chose to release it free on YouTube.
Yeah. So did they
Cannot
show
believe it.
like footage of the full body scan of Alex Rogopoulos in his vest?
Yeah, so Alex Rogopoulos, who's the head of Harmonix, he's a character in this game. He does the voice, and it's just surreal to
because
hear.
he gave them a lot of money, right? Like it was a Kickstarter.
Maybe it
reward,
was.
wasn't
I guess I don't know the story
I
behind
thought that
it.
he was one of the big backers and
Yeah.
did one of the tiers that got
Okay.
him to appear in the game.
So he's like a big character in the game.
And especially in the second act, he's a larger.
Yeah, and
presence.
it's just bizarre to hear him, Alex Rogopoulos from Harmonix, like in a very dorky way, interacting with like big name actors and having a back and forth where it's like, what a world! What is this game?
Well,
and like they
'cause-
even make jokes like in the second act where he talks about how his spaceship is powered by music. And He's
Yeah.
like, just between us, I'm kind of sick of the whole music thing. I really like.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, there's a lot of very surreal, strange things packed into Broken Age.
His first bits of dialogue in Act 2 are really fantastic.
Yes,
too.
yeah. So that's spoiling it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's super funny.
They take a lot of assumptions and kind of throw them out the window in a funny way. So.
Right. Yeah, definitely. All right, that's Broken Age from Double Fine,
Fun
everybody.
game.
Yeah, I'm glad you liked it as
I
much as you
am
did, Cork.
super excited to keep playing it.
Yeah.
I think it's funnier. So far, the puzzles are better. I'm reminded by how pretty it is. Like
I think the music's great.
the music is amazing. Peter McConnell has nailed it, and
Yeah.
it's just so much time passes, you forget how much you liked something like Broken Age Act 1 in this case. Coming back to it, it's just kind of like, okay, they spent a lot of time making a really cool thing.
Yeah, definitely. Kyle, what have you been playing?
Broken Age. We should talk about Broken Age. Well,
No,
no, okay.
it's
So
a
I've been-
documentary, you guys.
so I've been playing Broken Age, and I recently reviewed Box Boy and Affordable Space Adventures, and then I've also been playing the Mario Kart 8 DLC. Which is
Oh
cool.
yeah, so this is like F-Zero stuff and Animal Crossing characters.
Yeah,
and-
well, there's one like F-Zero map, which is something blue. Are any of
Big
you guys
Blue.
like Big Blue? Is that what it's called? Okay, yeah, that is actually the coolest of all the new maps.
I just want to hear that music.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's one of those. There's a couple in Mario Kart 8 that don't have laps. It's just like one continuous track.
Right.
And that's one of those when it just like you're just like the first part of the track, you're just like spiraling down. And if you pump that up to like 200 cc,
Yeah.
it is absurd.
Just
like you're-
grinding the walls the entire time.
Oh yeah, you're basically playing F-Zero.
That's
at that
typically
point.
how I play
Yeah.
F-Zero.
I really want to play the new DLC.
They've
It's-
been
it's
so
good.
ambitious with all their DLC with Mario Kart. Like,
Yeah.
the first batch was great. You get Link, and then like those 4 maps or the 4 courses are all
think
fantastic.
I prefer the new batch of course. Like they're all good, but
Yeah.
like if for some weird reason you just wanted to buy one of the DLC packs, I would almost say get the second one.
Okay.
Unless you really like Zelda,
Yeah.
because then you
Sure.
want
I
Link,
bought
but
them. I have like no excuse not to be playing them.
Yeah.
It just hasn't.
The one, I guess it's kind. I don't know. I don't even know if I would call it a complaint, but if you want to play the 200cc like in the sort of single player, I don't know what is that called? The
Like-
it's not
The rich campaign. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about? Oh god,
It has a name, like the Grand Prix, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's Grand
like
Prix.
if you want to play the 200cc maps, you do have to beat all the 150cc maps, which I never did. Like I'm not good
So
enough.
you just want to like see them as a novelty, but you can't even get that far.
Yeah,
without
well, what you can do is like in multiplayer, like we did in our test chamber, like you can play all the maps on 200cc. You just have to kind of go into multiplayer and like
Yeah.
make it a manual setting. And it's super fun. Like, even though we played it in the test chamber, and even though we were all like in, the last 4 slots of, place wise, like, it is super fun because like when you go over jumps, you fly forever.
Oh,
and
right.
And like it's awesome. It's really cool. Like, I'm never going to be good enough to like place first and like unlock all those stars and everything, but I'm so happy that mode exists because it's insane.
That's what I was gonna say. Is like I remember I think it was in the early Mario Karts, I went through and beat all the Grand Prix with all the CCs and stuff like that up through Double Dash, I think. But man, I think it was around the time that Mario Kart Wii came out, and it's like trying to take that game seriously in the single player and be like, I'm gonna beat them all. That's like trying to be good at Mario Party. Like, it is a mistake from the beginning. This thing is against you. Do not do this. But the multiplayer wise, like, it's fantastic. Throw all the speeds at me.
Yeah, make it like everyone's just bouncing. It's like bumper cars after a certain point. Just everyone's just grinding on walls.
Yeah,
it's great. I really like it a lot.
Hey, Kyle. I've also been playing Affordable Space Adventures on the Wii U. We should talk about that game a little bit.
Yeah, do you feel like it's already kind of slid like way out of the radar? Or I don't know what a good way to refer to it as.
So it is the definition of a very cool little game to me.
Yeah.
But it's this downloadable game on the Wii U where
exclusively for the Wii U.
Yeah, from the team that made Spin the Bottle Bumpy's Party, which is my favorite test chambers of all time.
Wait, is that like a Nintendo sort of third party?
No, they're just an independent developer that only makes for the Wii U.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an odd choice.
A shadow company of Nintendo. Like, no, I promise we have third party companies working on this thing.
But I mean, it's a puzzle game that, how would you describe it, Kyle? It takes place in space, and it kind of, from the outside, it kind of looks like Insanely Twisted Shadow Planet.
That's like the best way to describe it, I think, is it's like a cross between Insanely Twisted Shadow Planet and the Swapper.
Right.
Like more closer to the Swapper in terms of like a puzzle game. Like, because Insanely Twisted Shadow Planet was a little Metroid-y.
Sure.
But this is just like you control this ship and you kind of go through these stages and solve puzzles. And like the premise, the sort of idea of the story is that you are on vacation. You can like rent this ship. And
no one cares about the story.
I think it's funny, actually.
Okay. It's really funny. It's like a little tiny capsule.
Yeah, because like the idea is like you get this whole cutscene. It's kind of like you're being pitched on a timeshare, like a vacation timeshare, and it's like, we've never had any accidents. Rent this ship, come explore this planet, and then like right as the game starts, like there are 1,000 like dead ships around you. There's this huge explosion and stuff, and then you just have to make your way out. Like, that's where the story kind of ends. Is you just have to make your way off the planet.
And kind of the gimmick of the game is that on the Wii U gamepad, they have basically the ship's controls. So you can control the different aspects of the engine, like which engine to use, and like the stabilizer and the electricity output and the heat. And you have like a scanner you can turn on and off.
I mean, like, it sounds like a sort of like Starship Captain Fantasy, and similar to something like FTL, but not with the So Micro.
It's not a sim, though. I mean, it's just a simple puzzle game. So the conundrum is that as you're working your way through this crazy alien planet, you come across different creatures and you scan them, and they'll have like a radius, and it'll be like, well, to get by this creature, it will
respond
attack
to sound, so you want to quiet your engine.
That's right. Or like this one is really sensitive to electricity, so you have to get by them without using their electricity. So it's like, okay, what takes electricity on my ship? Okay, it turns out the stabilizers do, and the thrust, so I have to bring that down to a minimum, and then I can slowly sneak by. But that is where I've had to kind of learn along with the game, because I found out that every time I'm trying to micromanage too tightly, like the different levels in my engine and what I'm actually outputting, I'm probably doing it wrong. And there's usually some gimmick or twist that I can use to get through. Like there's, for example, this one part of the cave where there's this giant creature right there, and it was detecting everything on my ship to a small degree. So I was trying to kill every single component of my ship, run with like the lowest possible power to try and sneak by, and I just couldn't do it. And it turns out what I had to do is crank everything up on my ship, start way back, just effing floor it, and then kill my engine as
momentum.
I'm like coasting through his little zone, and then like reignite my engine in time before like I slam into like some alien that'll eat me.
This is a super weird aside, but that reminds me of trying to drive past one of the infected houses in State of Decay, because sound is a thing. So I would gun it and then see the map, because like when you gun it, the radius of your sound increases. And then I would kill the engine and coast by the infected houses so that they wouldn't run
sink
out
low in your seat.
Yep, exactly. And then flip them off and then gun it on the other side of it. Anyway, total aside, but
yeah, that's fair. But I really like the presentation in this game.
Yeah.
Overall, like I think the sound design is really like chunky. Like your first engine that you get,
the gas engine sounds like you're really like turning on this old engine.
It's like a 70s muscle car.
Yeah, it's cool.
Basically, yeah.
And then there's like which we did do in the test chamber a little bit. There's a co-op mode where one person can do everything that's happening on screen, and one person controls the ship and one person controls the scanner. And I think we had a pretty good time with it when we did it in the test chamber.
It's pretty simple.
Yeah, I in general, like I prefer kind of having control over everything myself, but it is a really smartly implemented way to get 3 people playing that game.
That sounds like, what was that iOS game?
Space Team?
Space Team.
A little bit like that, yeah.
That's one where you're like shouting at each other,
you have to juggle like commands with people.
And like it's worth pointing out, I think, Hanson, like you were talking about how you were adjusting all these levels.
Yeah,
like if you're doing that too much, like you're hitting that point where you're probably doing it wrong. Like it's really, it's not so much about like adjusting all these like minute levels. It's usually like some broad sort of puzzle like that where it's like, I got to cut the engine at this point and turn it back on, etc. So it's really cool, and it's one of the few like non-Nintendo games that uses the gamepad successfully. Like you really get a sense that you're like controlling the ship on the gamepad, and it's important to pay attention to both. The only thing that kind of frustrated me which kind of has frustrated me with like most DS games and Wii U games, and I don't think anyone's ever going to figure out how to solve the problem, is like switching from the controls to pulling out your stylus and like adjusting things and putting your stylus back.
You got to put the stylus in your mouth, Kyle.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
The stylus.
I usually throw it up in the air and try to do as much as I can and catch it like a drummer.
You were a drummer.
So
what do you use the stylus for? I haven't had to use that yet.
I prefer to use that with the with the meters and stuff.
Please get out of here.
Why don't you grow out a fingernail like one of those weird guitar
what's
players?
that?
I'm really nervous, so I chew my nails all the time.
Yeah, definitely.
Or like a Coke nail, like
Just to play at Portable Space Adventures.
that's great.
But it's nice to see in 2015, some novel Wii U exclusive experiences are coming out, even if it's not necessarily from Nintendo this time around. But it's a cool implementation.
Have you finished it?
No, I haven't.
It has a cool ending, actually. Like the ending made me chuckle quite a bit, and it was really rewarding.
How affordable is this game?
I think it's $20.
That's actually not very affordable for downloadable games.
I was actually kind of surprised by that too.
That's kind of funny, actually.
Yeah, they kind of opened themselves up to that by naming their game Portable Space Adventures.
I like it.
Yeah, definitely.
Who has $20 in this day and age?
You don't know me.
So
we saw you on the Double Fine documentary, so we know you pretty well. I think.
Obviously.
yeah, there we go.
I brought my own cameras.
They certainly had a lot to say about you.
Yeah.
I have not played more Bloodborne, Tim. I'm sorry.
Neither have I, actually.
Well, you've already beaten it 4.5 times.
No, I'm not like Matt Miller or anything. Matt Miller is like on his third New Game
that
Plus.
true?
Yeah, well, second New Game Plus, because first is a normal playthrough, then it's New Game Plus, and it's New Game Plus.
There's so much to read.
Yeah. But anyway, he got really into it. I did start my New Game Plus. I got shut down by Vicar Amelia, which is like the big kind of dog deer lady boss in the church that clutches a pendant. These games are fun to describe.
Naturally.
That people would hit walls with her sometimes too. I did hop back in for a while to check out the new load times and was like floored by how much they trimmed off. For how often you're looking at, let's say like, all right, well, I went and got a bunch of, blood vials in this area. So I'm going to go back to the Hunter's Dream and then respawn, go through Central Yarnum and get more blood vials so I can top that off and go back at that boss. And between that, maybe dying, you'd be looking at load times, for maybe like 5 minutes for like this round trip, since they almost were a minute themselves. Now it's like 15 to 20 seconds. They show item descriptions like they did with the previous Souls games during the load times. It's so fast that it made me want to play it more.
It's saving so much time at the end of your life that adds up.
I'm sitting there. It's funny, but like the end clock said like 33 hours when I beat it the first time. Like that's absurd.
If you do the math.
I probably played that game for, somewhere like 45 hours, I feel like. 40 hours. It's a lot of load time when you add it all up. But anyway, I'm sitting there like when I would boot up the game and be done with the load scene, I'd like be like leaning in towards my screen to see if like something's popping up, if textures are loading late, or how are they compensating for this?
Right.
And why didn't they do this to begin with? And I can't really notice.
It's just time to optimize at the end of the production, I guess, that they just now have. And I don't know how it works on a technical level, but it's pretty cool. Hopefully they just keep going till eventually there are no load
Everyone
times.
should pretend that the game is out even when it's not, and that everyone is bitching about the load times. And then fix it and then release the game.
I see.
That's a good call.
Pro tip. How that works.
Anyway, fun game. I'm looking forward to go back to it. But
I guess I have played a little bit of a game that I wanted to talk about last week in reference to Bloodborne, but I brought home Nightmare Creatures on the PlayStation 1.
Oh, wow.
And played that because that'll be fun to go back and forth between that and Bloodborne. And it is shocking that it really just feels like a demake of Bloodborne.
Really?
Like if you have any nostalgia for the PlayStation 1 generation and you really like Bloodborne, do yourself a favor and just check out Nightmare Creatures.
You can
it's also on N64.
watch our replay.
Oh, it is? Okay. Yeah, we did a replay of it, sure.
But I mean, I do like the idea of revisiting it. So what are like tell me about how the game controls.
It's fluid.
Like garbage.
It's perfect.
No, yeah, it's a little bit
Bayonetta.
clunky, but there is like a roll button, which is nice. That you're more agile than you think that you would. You have a gun with very, very limited shots, but unlike Bloodborne, it's basically a one-hit kill.
Okay.
And then you choose between a guy and a girl, and you have different weapons. But I mean, you're fighting against zombies and crazy werewolf things that burst out at night.
Is there a day-night cycle?
No, not really. I guess
And you
it's
can
all
see
in the
really
night.
far into the distance, right?
Well, it's a PlayStation 1 game, so definitely. But it's just a little quirky thing, but it really does feel like a remake of Bloodborne in some weird ways.
Is it fun to you?
No.
What's the saving like?
That's a good question. I really don't think I got to a save point. I think
glowing
I
gem?
died again and again after the first area.
I'm because like I think we replayed that we did our replay of Nightmare Creatures before. Like on replay, we kind of started getting into. If you're listening to this and you know what replay is, we play older games every week,
every Saturday,
and Super Replays are full playthroughs of older games.
Sure,
some of them get quite bad, but before we started doing that, I think we did Nightmare Creatures. So I have like this patience and sort of intrigue into like old bad games. And if I beat like Rising Zan, Samurai
you can beat
Gunman,
Nightmare Creatures.
I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, it was rough.
Okay.
Me and my friends that were playing it died after like the first big area a couple times.
Okay.
But yeah, just a weird novelty.
All right. Which game you liking more, Bloodborne or Nightmare Creatures?
That's a really tough call. I've probably played them for about the same amount of time.
And you couldn't read a single Bloodborne review without seeing Nightmare Creatures comparison. Like,
No.
You know, Bloodborne's fun, but
right. Hashtag my Nightmare Creatures. But what else have you been playing, Tim?
I guess we talked about a lot of the ones, but I finished up Ori and the Blind Forest.
Oh, sure.
And I really liked that game.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
If I'm in like a volcano, am I near the end?
Yeah.
Okay.
Big time, 100%.
Cool.
That volcano area was actually pretty cool. But it's a fun game. I really liked it. I mean, it's really challenging, but I didn't think I've heard a lot of people saying it was like, oh my god, this game's so punishing. I thought it was fair.
You're pretty good at platformers, though.
I don't know how much of that is in there because I don't like to think that I'm like when you're dying a decent amount in a game like Ori, you know, it's just hard for me to understand that there may be people that are dying, you know, 2 times as many times. But I really liked it. There are some frustrating parts, but you always know what you did wrong. And you get back in there after you load up on your checkpoints. I think the last half of the game is pretty strong. I really did like. You can start to peter out in the last part of games like that, and maybe it was because I played Bloodborne and put it down, but like that volcano area specifically, I remember like it's very cleverly designed. That game handles kind of boss encounters in a way that it's more just like intense, like almost in the same way that like Super Meat Boy did, where the boss battle in against like Battle of Little Slugger is actually just like a really intense auto-scrolling level as a boss chases you, and that's how they handle it. And the last sequence that was like one of those sequences was really well done.
Sure,
some frustrating parts, but like. And the story, I thought the story came around really well. Like It's kind of bookended by cool story segments, and it tugged at my heartstrings. They're there, and the game's adorable. It's gorgeous. If you haven't played it, you should get into it.
Did you run back through and like try to get everything? Because that's actually kind of what I was doing before going into the volcano.
I didn't really feel the need in that game because once you're screwed, you're pretty much screwed in a way that like you're going to die in lava or something, especially around that point. So I didn't feel like there was a huge benefit to having a bunch of extra HP.
Sure. It was more to avoid frustration. You know what I mean? Like to like just get kind of, I don't want to say unfairly, I don't know if that's the right term, but just to get impatient and start running up at like trying to bypass enemies and getting killed was kind of getting annoying. So I went, and I read in our afterwards that you can't go back and get everything after you beat the game.
Are you still really concerned about 100%ing stuff?
I do. Like when it comes to like those type of games, like Metroid and like Guacamelee was another one that I like really, I want to fill out that whole map and get everything. And I've only played a little Axiom Verge, but I'm sure I'm going to get that itch with that game too.
If I can't go back and do it all at the end, like Infamous is one of those series where it's like I didn't love Second Son, but like hey, if all that stuff's still out there and it's very clear what my objectives are to get that shard or clear that area out, like I'll go do it if I like the gameplay enough. But if I can't go back, I'm not going to stress out about it.
I don't mind sort of artificially extending Ori because I've been liking it a lot.
Okay.
So like just to have an excuse to kind of run back through and re-explore. It's also like it's just fun to like be like, oh, I remember that area. Like that's why I get that itch for those Metroid type games.
True.
Because you've been running past that area for a while and you finally have that triple jump or something like that. So.
Well, knock yourself out, Kyle.
Tim, I'm going to. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to let you judge me for doing it.
I'm going to try to stop you physically. I'll be waiting at your home, Kyle.
Just constantly sending me friend requests and
Yeah.
like, come join my game.
Yep.
Stop playing Ori.
Yeah.
Come play with me.
Tim, what I really want to talk to you about quickly is this immersive theater experience that we had in Minneapolis here.
Oh, so it's like, if you're going to ask what have you been playing lately, this conversation kind of fits underneath like the same kind of game that like everyone gone to Rapture is like.
Yeah.
So I don't even know how to set this up, but when you guys were in the UK, Jeff and Ben,
For the Arkham Knight
For the
cover story,
you guys-
there's
yeah.
a big theater fan at Rocksteady, and he's like, you guys, if you're in London, you have like a day to spare, go to this play. It's from a company called Punch Drunk, and they're putting on this play called The Drowned Man. And they also have a play that they used to run in the UK, then they brought over, and it's like on the East Coast, and I think it's still going on, but it's called Sleep No More. I've heard a couple people talk about it, like even developers are really into it. And we had no context for what it was, and we just went there completely blind. And it turns out that it was in a 5-story abandoned giant warehouse in downtown London, and you wore basically an eyes wide shut mask. And then the play is happening with multiple characters scattered throughout this 5-story building, and you follow whatever storylines you want. You interact with whatever actors you want, and they'll
these
interact with you.
Crazy sets, like this little like chapel in the middle of this giant room that was like sand everywhere.
Yeah, because it was like an old film studio, and so that was like the Mars movie. And then they also had like recreated like this whole outdoor area, and then like a street from the 40s with like multiple shops. You can just go and walk in wherever one you want, and then like, oh, I like the look of this actor. Let's see what their storyline's like, and then it kind of generally interweaves with everybody else. But
Yeah,
it
it
was
does
crazy.
it does feel like a Gone Home like experience.
I mean, the reason I brought up everyone's gone to Rapture is because so the one that we saw, which is there's a basically an old soap factory in Minneapolis that's been repurposed as sort of like this artist area. They have like this pretty cool like haunted basement they do,
Right.
And that's where it was, with this huge like dank basement.
and it is Crime and Punishment.
Crime and
is
Punishment
the adaptation that this play is.
Yeah, and so I don't know anything about Crime and Punishment. Not in real life. I know no consequences, and I've never been punished for any of my transgressions. But so basically, I went into it. Yeah, I put the mask on, signed a waiver, and went down. Was in this like lounge where we were just drinking tea and waiting for the thing to start. And then you're just kind of ushered in, and then immediately it's like this kind of weird sort of like Raggedy Ann kind of like peasant girl that's leading you through and telling you to be quiet. And then you just go in, and it's like, okay, what's happening here? It looks like it's in London somewhere. It looks like they're trying to emulate like rundown apartment buildings and just squalor, an impoverished area. And like Everyone's Gone to Rapture, which that game is going to let you just sort of activate these memories, and then characters like the ghosts of memories will start to kind of walk through the world, and you can either follow them or not, and you can follow them for a while and see what they end up doing, but you also could have gone off and followed the other character. And that's what it felt like when we were doing this. It's like, all right, who's this like lecherous dude who seems like he's maybe going to go cheat on his fiance in the red light district? Like, I'll follow him. And then I follow him from this dingy little apartment into what is their approximation of the red light district as he's trying to wheel and deal with a pimp.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, all right, what's the repercussions of that? What's that going to be? I'm going to follow this guy. And then some lumberjack dude with an axe drags a metal axe across the floor past me. Just total non sequitur in my instance. He was probably doing something else. And then I'm like, well, I'm following that guy. What's he going to do?
Yeah.
And then I watch him as he like does something with that axe later, and then they incorporate some like practical effects in a way I wasn't expecting.
Right.
But then, if you think that you're on the far edge of it, you'll hear like a bell clang
Or a scream on the other side,
Screams, and then like one of the actors will come tearing across the space, and so it's kind of like you just feel like you just like need to follow the commotion as if you were someone that was just a bystander in this
It's
thing.
interesting how it has similarities with level design, where they'll try and draw your eye with like the brighter areas, or like they'll have something loud and obnoxious going on, and clearly they want you to go that way. But like in this instance where it's just all anonymous, your face is covered, you can't speak, you just feel like you're in a first-person game, and like my instincts kick in, where it's always like, F you, game. I know you want me to go this way.
Right.
I'm going to go look over this way. Like, you don't want me to look at this actor right now? I'm going to find out when this actor's motions loop.
Yeah.
You know? And so you just get right in their face like you would with an NPC. And it's bizarre. It's the most I felt like I've been living a video game in a long time.
Yeah, it was really, I mean, that's a great way to put it. And like, I even went into a room that I don't know if I was supposed to be in. I saw like all the actors like where they're supposed to be, and like
that's the best.
It's like that's what it looks like, a game design document and pathing of AI.
That's exactly right. That reminded me of like Stanley Parable when you get to like the museum and it shows like the development of the game and all this stuff that's in there. It's like, because it's a room where it's like, I don't know if I'm supposed to be back here, and it shows the breakdown of every actor. I love that. Just like full disclosure, this is what we're doing.
It was really weird.
If you want to try and map it out.
My favorite weird moment where it's just kind of like you talked about, like there's this obvious, there's even like, you know, tiers of ticket prices that they'll kind of make sure you see all the most important stuff.
Sure.
But, you know, I was watching some intense like police interrogation because I followed that lecherous dude all the way up to like he was accused of some crime and brought back to what would be the police station, and there was like this crazy intense like desk flipping interrogation.
Yeah.
And then I was just like, all right, well, I guess this is done. This cop is just weeping now, and I'm going to go out here and what's this little door? Like, oh, there's a naked woman with like a horse skull mask on, dancing in front of a mirror. It's as if I stepped into like a David Lynch. The whole thing feels really David Lynch as well. And I'm rewatching Twin Peaks, so that's a whole another weird layer.
The weird thing with that is I know the exact room you're talking about. I also found it. I looked through that door. And maybe this is a reflection of who we are on the inside, but I just saw
a naked lady with a horse mask?
It was a really muscular naked guy with the horse mask that was like gyrating like with this like red blanket.
Well, hell.
Also, did you catch the like little newt like girl that was running around from Aliens?
Yeah, there was some crazy lady with frizzy hair and she's all dirty looking.
Yeah. So I was following her and she was running throughout the entire place. And so I was following her as quickly as I could. And she was like hanging from the ceiling, like disguising herself in the rafters so that the guy with the axe couldn't see her. But I was following her around for so long, she eventually grabbed me and brought me over to this area way off to the side where just the two of us. And then she like flipped up this blanket that was covering one side of an exposed cardboard box, like a relatively small cardboard box. And she like pushed me in the box and then crawled into it with me and then like closed the blanket. So it's the two of us crammed into this tiny box, and she lit a candle and then told me this like 6-minute story about how she murdered her cousin. And it was just the most surreal thing because
nothing like that happened to me.
Okay. It was like 3 minutes in, I was like, this is all great, but I don't really want to be here anymore. But it's like when it's a one-on-one thing with the actor, it's like you can't just leave. I guess you could. And that's the power of anonymity, I guess.
And this whole place kind of smells like stale sweat. So
yeah.
I'm gonna need to get out of this box, lady.
And my foot was like jutting out of the box because I'm a tall guy. And then like people thought that my foot was like a prop. So everybody walking by kept like grabbing my foot. And I was like, no, I'm just like you.
Did you start making weird noises?
Yeah. But definitely like search immersive theater. I feel like it's a trend that's really climbing in the play world, and definitely check it out. It's worth having the play world
theater,
the play industry.
It
sounds like Synecdoche, New York, kind of.
Yeah, sure.
Synecdoche.
Is that how they pronounce it? It's not Synecdoche.
It's Synecdoche.
Well, to play on that Synecdoche, right?
Anyway, all that isn't to say like come to Minneapolis and see that one thing because it only runs for like a week. But yeah, I'm sure there's something else going on where you are, especially if it's a major city.
Yeah, and I love the intersection of kind of theater and video games. It very much feels like that.
To bring it all back. Yeah.
Back home. Anything else you've been playing that you want to cover?
It feels pretty good. Just like Hearthstone on iOS a little bit, but
sure.
Super Mario 64
same game.
on Wii U.
You have been?
Yeah, a little
cool.
bit. It's like
holds up okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It still feels great.
You're playing just on the gamepad?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that's a good, lengthy first section. We're going to take a little break, and then we'll be right back with emails from you guys.
Yes. All right, welcome back to the Game Informer Show. So for the next segment, we're going to go over a bunch of questions we got from all the listeners and watchers. Kyle, are you all right?
Yeah, I was fiddling with my wires.
Fiddling with the wires with Kyle.
Yeah.
So anyway, every week
segment.
we encourage you to send in your questions to podcast@gameinformer.com. We're going to be answering reader questions every single week. And then we even have a question of the week that we're going to be doing. So if the very best, most interesting question, I don't want to try to guide your question writing ideas in any direction, but last week Chris did an awesome job. That was a great question.
Which question was that?
That was the one. Chris was the guy who just was having trouble. Like, he still followed the game industry. He had time to play games, but he was having trouble just kind of drumming up enthusiasm to play anything. And he asked us if we ever been in a funk and what do you do to get out of it. And it was an awesome question. So we sent a little care package over to him. And we'll do the same to you if you write in the question of the week.
Is this still a mystery care package? What's happening here, Tim?
I am not going to say, because it may change over time.
Still
so
saltines
we'll get you a little
flare.
something. I don't know.
And the thing is, it might change over time, but it's only going to get better. That is something we can guarantee.
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
So, but it is something. Anyway, let's kick this off here. So Rusty L writes, well, first and foremost, wanted to congratulate us on a job well done with the podcast. So more kind words about the podcast.
Sure. Comment of the week right there.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for the kind words and tell a friend and all that. But anyway, so Rusty says, I've been a relatively long-time subscriber of the magazine and can distinctly recall getting my first 2 issues after walking into a GameStop so many years ago. They were the Warriors and From Russia with Love cover stories, with the former still to this day being my favorite cover story of yours. With all that said, which cover story garnered the most excitement around the office since GI's humble beginnings? Rusty. So we can't speak for like the beginnings.
Sure.
But, what do you guys think we got most excited about like over the years?
That's interesting. Yeah. So for me, like I've been here for like 5 years, and maybe it's just because it was the first trip that I went on. But I remember first learning about Skyrim before that was announced. And that was a huge deal. Then knowing it, like that was going to be my first trip. And it's like, oh, got to interview Todd Howard. Oh, okay. Let's see how this is going to go. So that was stressful. And also that was so much fun because there was so much buzz when we announced it. And then like every story that we'd post, there'd be so many forum threads started about like breaking down every single line of every video interview I did. And that was just like the greatest introduction to like, oh, this is seeing peak enthusiasm for the video game industry. And it was just a blast.
Yeah.
But personally, most excitement when I learned that Obsidian was making a Paper Mario inspired South Park game, I lost my mind. Like first hearing the pitch, like that is just everything that I want in the world. That is such a bizarre thing. And the fact that we got to talk to Matt and Trey for that cover story, I was ecstatic about the entire thing.
Yeah.
And
that was going to be my answer too, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. You're the most excited for that?
Yeah, I think so. I'm going to sit back and think a little more.
Okay. Tim, I'm trying to think like, knowing that we're going to go, it wasn't like the announcement of the game, but going on the Metal Gear Solid 5 trip and visiting Konami and talking to Kojima, that was pretty huge.
Yeah, personally, that was like a huge one for me. I did like more research for that cover story than I think I essentially played the entire series again.
Yeah, you really did.
As research, and that was a lot of fun. And then just the culmination of being able to like play Ground Zeroes and talk with Kojima and just learn more about Phantom Pain, like that was really cool. Mm-hmm. I think personally, this was even before I was even... So my first cover story I ever wrote was Resistance 3, which was really personally fulfilling for me. It's the same guys that ended up heading up Sunset Overdrive, and I was really excited about the opportunity. But before that, we landed the Portal 2 cover.
Oh man!
And I remember being in the office when like I was like proofreading the Portal 2 cover story and trying to wrap my head. Or I remember Megan Marie used to work here, and she wrote it, and I remember she was having trouble like. Admittedly so, trying to like explain in text some of these
like the paint?
Some like the paint and just like acceleration gel and stuff like that. And I remember reading it, not understanding absolutely everything, but being like, holy hell, this game is going to be everything that Portal fans want.
Mm-hmm. And that was before the announcement of Portal 2, right? Like our cover was the announcement.
It was the announcement, which is just like at the time, like I think that was awesome. And then personally, like as far as like garnering excitement after I realized how good the game was going to be, at least I thought Shadow of Mordor was like one of those I was watching where I'm like, no one knows this is happening, and I think this is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I remember on the Shadow of Mordor trip, I remember even talking after the cover story trip where it's like, there's a lot of really cool ideas in this game, and like worst case scenario, this is a cult hit that people are going to be bringing up for the next 10 years. Like, remember that one weird game that had the really interesting Nemesis system? It turns out it kind of broke beyond cult hit status. So yeah,
I think one that we were really excited about is Arkham City, because you remember like Arkham Knight, the Batman Arkham Knight came out, and it was kind of like we were excited about that too, but there wasn't like nobody had really seen it before, right? So it kind of surprised everyone. Yeah. And going into the sequel, I know that
you're talking about Arkham Asylum into
Arkham City.
Oh, okay.
And plus, like the cover designs in Arkham City, I thought were so great.
Oh yeah,
like a black and white.
Yeah,
that was it looks so cool.
And then I would say personally, I and I wrote it. I'm really happy with the Lego Marvel Superheroes cover because that was something that I was gunning for, like a deeper look at Traveler's Tales for a while.
Yeah,
and there just hadn't been a like the proper timing on it. And it was a lot of fun to go to their studio and meet everybody and kind of do a deep dive on that game. And it was super, super early, which is something.
It was amazingly early. Also combined with they were wide open as far as video goes. So let us film like these super early sections of Lego Marvel. And you can look back in our hub and see this. I'm really proud of the videos because that was a rare trip where basically I rolled on every interview that we did.
Yeah.
And like all the demos they're showing us off the computers. But I still refer back to that when like the new Lego games are coming out. Like, oh yeah, we had a really great look at actually the early production of a Lego game with Lego Marvel.
Yeah. Exactly.
And that was kind of fun because nobody thought that mashup could happen because of Warner Brothers owning that. So how would you do the Disney owned Marvel? And that turned out it was cool.
It had badass cover art too.
Yeah, that's true. That was a fun trip.
Yeah.
Another kind of recent one, like on that, in terms of that, like no one really knew it was going to happen. I really liked. I wasn't involved in writing it, but the Just Cause 3 cover I thought was really exciting because that was one that people were really excited about, and we were kind of the ones that were like, "Yeah, this is coming. Like Just Cause 3 is coming out."
Right.
Like the reveal. Yeah.
And so that was exciting. But like I said, you kind of South Park would have been mine too. Like that was I had just started. I think I'd only been here for a few months and kind of being like seeing some of the early footage of it and like knowing that we had talked to Trey Parker, Matt Stone, even listening to some of that interview was just like insane. Like it was really exciting to know that we were gonna like be launching that soon. So
yeah, for sure. Speaking of which, we should point out new cover story launching next week, which I also think is a pretty exciting thing that's been really fun to think about and work on. So look forward to that.
Sweet. Yeah. The one cover story I wish I could have been involved with, if I could like wind back time in all of Game Informer's history, I would have been on the Guitar Hero Metallica Game Informer cover and interviewed Metallica.
Yeah.
Like that would have been like my dream.
Did Miller do that?
I don't know. But he's a pretty cool dude.
Helgeson? Yeah.
I mean he's pretty hip.
We don't have it on the site anymore, but he did a rock video for ZZ Top's Sharp Dressed Man.
Miller did?
And he wore sunglasses and it had like frame effect where he was like in
That's amazing.
Split.
Miller used to drive a motorcycle, so maybe I should back that up.
Also, I will speak for Miller and say that the most exciting cover story trip he ever went on was for Beatles Rock Band.
Yeah. That was big.
Because he got to interview McCartney and I think Yoko Ono. But
they went to Abbey Road.
Yeah, George Harrison's son. Like, he got to play Beatles Rock Band in Abbey Road with harmonics. Just crazy dream come true for a Beatles fan like him. So that was a really cool cover story.
I also have before working at Game Informer, I also have a really distinct memory of the Resident Evil 4 and Killer 7 like double covers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You said George Harrison's son,
isn't it? Yeah.
I don't know. So when they introduced him, did they say, "Here comes the son"? So the next question, Alex writes, "Hey guys, do any of you have a game that you can always go back to and have a good time with? After playing Castlevania HD for hundreds of hours," I'm assuming we're talking about Castlevania Symphony of the Night HD.
Must be, yeah.
"I think I need something new and was looking for suggestions. Thanks, Alex."
Well, mine's
Tetris.
Mine's Mega Man X. I will always be able to just rip through Mega Man X and just have a good time.
How often do you think you play that?
Like maybe once, maybe twice a year.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I'm jealous.
I've gotten it down to about 2 hours. Like if I'm not really trying to speed through it, I can rip through it in 2 hours. So that's mine. Yeah.
Sure.
Mega Man X.
I would probably go with, for me, it's Frequency and Amplitude on PS2. Like I have an SD TV set up in my bedroom just for Frequency and Amplitude because playing on an HD TV, there's that lag that you can't calibrate for.
Yeah.
But I think those are like my go-tos where, I mean, also it helps that I think the music rhythm genre ages really nicely visually, especially like those abstract designs like Frequency and Amplitude. So that's probably my answer.
I'd say one of them, probably Geometry Wars Retro Evolved.
Okay.
The very first one?
I like the first one a lot.
Yeah.
It's kind of built for that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a total cop-out if I had to have like a second place at Rock Band, I think, just because I've got so many songs over the years and, you know, like you said, they age well.
Yeah.
Can I guess yours, Tim?
What is it?
The original Resident Evil?
That is one of them. Yeah,
one of them.
Like Resident Evil 1
man.
or 2 or 4. Like those Resident Evils I think are up there. Also, Super Mario Galaxy is just absolutely something I can go back to over and over and over again. So yeah, hopefully there's some good ideas in there for you, Alex. So John O writes in, Speaking of, I am a longtime Resident Evil fan. I usually tweet.
God, how did this get in the bag?
Ben actually chose this one. This wasn't even me.
Damn it.
He usually, this is a weird one to say, I usually tweet at Tim Turi with my Resident Evil questions since he is the Resident Evil guru.
And so handsome.
I wouldn't also, your mommy loves you. Yes, she does. You forgot your lunch in the fridge.
Who's my special little guy?
For my mom. I don't consider myself a guru. There are some very educated. Goro. Yeah, I'm Resident Evil Goro. But with the recent announcement that the Resident Evil HD remaster has sold over 1 million copies, do you think this will finally be an indication to Capcom that we would like a Resident Evil 2 HD remaster? John. So
I don't think people appreciate enough the difference between that kind of remaster. Like, you can't just up-res a PS1 polygonal game like that.
The important thing to remember here is that Resident Evil 1 came out on PlayStation 1, and they completely overhauled that a generation later for the GameCube, and they used that era from like that PlayStation 2 GameCube era, the way that they made their character models and stuff, it was easier for them to kind of up-res those for re-release last generation and continuing that into this generation. So it's not as easy, and I'm not even saying that the Resident Evil HD remaster was easy. It seems like they were working on that for like a year, but what we would need is, like, they don't have that easily transferable, more easily updatable version of the game. They would have to just take a PlayStation 1 game and like make it from scratch all over again.
Well, they could up-res the GameCube version of Resident Evil 2.
That'd be great. That's what everybody wants. So you're basically asking them to make a full-on remake of Resident Evil 2.
Yeah.
I think that when we're talking about the Resident Evil series and a little over 1 million copies, that's actually kind of small potatoes for the Resident Evil series.
Sure.
But I, as a fan, 100% want that to happen. It is the number one thing I want from the series, I think, right now.
Would you want that to be like the remake of Resident Evil, or would you want them to basically add Resident Evil 4's perspective to Resident Evil 2's environments?
I went back and forth on that. There's been actually some mock-ups since I've thought about playing through Resident Evil 2 from like perspective of Leon, like over the shoulder, Resident Evil 4 style. Like, that'd be really cool.
Yeah.
And there's been even like mock-ups where people take the character models from like Darkside Chronicles, the Wii shooter. But I don't know. I think I miss those older style, like the classic formula, too much. I'd like it just to be kind of a straight remake with the new kind of updated control option where characters actually move in the direction you want.
It's a novel
It
idea.
is an interesting call. So that's what I'd want.
Sure.
You guys,
so keep reaching for the stars on Resident Evil 2. I
Stars.
don't think it's going to happen.
You said stars.
I got that, Tim.
Oh, okay.
The million certainly, it certainly exceeded Capcom's expectations, I think.
I have no idea what their expectations
Well, they
were.
sent out like 2 press releases for it. I don't think they would have done that if they thought that, if they didn't think that was going to happen.
Sure, if the game didn't sell as well as they wanted to, then they wouldn't have sent out.
We wouldn't, yeah.
They wouldn't have been heralding it or shouting it from the
If
mountaintops.
not a Resident Evil 2 remake, I think maybe a brand new old school style Resident Evil, strictly downloadable.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. I could see them doing 0 before 2.
I wish that Capcom would do like a. 0 would make more sense because it'd be a similar procedure as the HD remaster we just got. But I'd also love to see them do something completely different and do like a Mega Man 9 or 10 route where they make like a PlayStation 1 quality survival horror
that.
game.
That'd be great.
Where it's just blocky, awkward character models and grainy backgrounds. Man, I would really like that.
I just saw a developer, Double Fine, tweeting about how he's so in love with the look of PlayStation 1 games, and he was like trying to find texture packs for the original Metal Gear Solid.
Oh, nice.
It's like I feel like now maybe the PlayStation 1 hardcore nostalgia is at that age where they can start developing that type of thing. We talked last week about like that survival horror game that is made to look like a PlayStation 1 game. But I feel like that could be more and more of a trend going forward, is get rid of the 8-bit, 16-bit nostalgia retro crap and get into the good retro crap, the PlayStation 1 jankiness.
I'd absolutely agree because there's a lot of more and more, like people in their early 20s are talking about being raised on, N64 and PlayStation and stuff.
Sure.
So like these people have disposable income now. It's smart to start making games that cater to their nostalgia.
Sure.
This is an industry all about nostalgia, but I would also love that.
Yeah.
All right. So now Patrick writes, this is kind of following up on that, and it's something we didn't get to before, but what is the possibility that Kojima and company controversy with Konami and the cancellation of Silent Hills is really a publicity stunt a la his other promotions for his games? Best Patrick.
0.
Yeah, 0.
Next question.
It is
Evil 0.
It is. There's no chance because it's just gotten too real. Like
renaming studios, remembering his name from the boxes, and that's the thing. Like, I feel like Kojima has entered this Andy Kaufman-esque realm where, like, on his deathbed, people will be like, "Oh, this guy's coming back." It's like, no, he's done a couple of twists with the press. I mean, really, just like ultimately, like 2 main ones with 2's protagonist, and then.
But they've been so heavy-handed and see-through. Like he was never getting away with it.
Well, I think Metal Gear Solid 2 and the Raiden switch is a pretty good.
That was really good. But now in this era, like it's a little bit harder to hoodwink people that way. And if he's fooling us, he's really fooling us. And it's bleeding into Konami's like other franchises. Like they wouldn't let him go so far as to like just kill and halt all the goodwill and enthusiasm that's been building up for Silent Hills. Like,
this would be the kind of prank where your friend calls you and tells you that your parents were in a car accident.
Right.
I don't think Kojima's willing to do that.
He's fooling stockholders now.
That's right.
That said, the announcement, the confirmation that Konami has like confirmed that Silent Hills is just dead.
But the frustrating part, it's dead. But the frustrating part is that they said, "Oh, the franchise, we're still looking to move forward with it." But like, if you're not going to do this, I understand like Kojima Productions might be in disarray.
What happened is your dad, you're 16, your dad promised you a Ferrari. Like, son, I'm getting you that Ferrari.
We've all seen Boyhood.
I'm getting you a Ferrari. It's going to be awesome, man. Test drive this Ferrari. Just let's take it around the block.
Yeah.
You've played it. You know how awesome it is. Like, okay, all right. So I'm not getting you the Ferrari, but I do have this bicycle with one flat wheel that has bad controls.
I'll put money down that the next Silent Hill game is some sort of mobile thing, like some sort of card game or something in the mobile arena. If anyone wants to take that $5 bet right now.
Absolutely not.
No,
I mean, are you just
so.
saying because where Konami is?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, because
I think
Konami's
it's just,
in a weird spot.
Yeah, definitely. But with PT being taken down, and the reason they give is because it's a promotional item for a game that will now no longer exist. It's like, why not just patch it and let it stand? Like, rename it if you're weirded out about the playable teaser thing. Do like a Portal style patch. Just remove that tease at the end. Just put in credits. Like, just keep it as and even charge for it. Charge like $10 for it and just leave it up because it's such a cool experience.
If you look at how they've taken his name, and this is a lot of speculation, but I mean, if you look at how they take his name off of Metal Gear Solid 5.
Sure.
If you look at what happened to Mega Man after Keiji Inafune left Capcom, I think we're looking at something where it's not just, it's about like, we need to stamp these games out. Like, we need to get Metal Gear out, but like PT's coming down. Like, this isn't a Kojima joint anymore. We're not working officially with Kojima in the context of Konami anymore.
Right.
And I just think it's a thing where it's like, we need to tear off this Band-Aid and move on. And I think that's what's going on at Konami.
Could be. The only consolation out there, I guess, is if the rumors are true and Kojima leaves Konami at the end of the year or after Metal Gear comes out, I mean, some smart publisher out there has probably seen the amount of enthusiasm for PT.
Right.
And
how loosely linked it is to actual Silent Hills.
Exactly. And so in theory, they could still get Kojima. You can debate how involved he was even with the PT demo, but contract him and his team, which could leave with him, to produce something new. That would be amazing.
That would be like Sony should do that for more.
Yes, exactly.
And they could just call it PT.
They probably, well, I don't know about that.
PT2.
P2. I don't know if you can trademark 2 letters next to each other.
They call it Piano 3.
That's true.
It's a great idea.
Anyway, that was a good question. So we're going to click over to like the question of the week here. So
okay.
This is from Pat from LA. So Pat asks, ask any adult, well, he starts with a statement actually. Ask any adult gamer what their favorite game is, and chances are they'll name a game that came out years ago. I assume this has something to do with the fond gaming memories leading to a deeper personal connection over time. Question: how likely is it that a new game, one that hasn't even been made yet, could eventually become your new favorite game of all time? And what would it take for a new game to topple your current all-time favorites? He gives an example. Right now, it's hard to imagine a new game dethroning the greats like Final Fantasy VII or Zelda, but I wonder when it'll finally happen. Thanks, Pat. P.S. I love your show, magazine, website, and your videos.
Nostalgia is too strong. I don't think that's going to happen for a strong majority out there. I think it's basically the game that really blew your mind as a kid will be locked in.
How about you personally?
Me personally, I feel like I kind of wrestled with this just because Final Fantasy VII shattered my mind. I never played an RPG before, and so that was always, well, this is my favorite game. Just can't top it no matter
Right.
what. And then Shadow of the Colossus came out. I was like, boy, that's really good. And as it's been, 10 years since Shadow of the Colossus, and looking back now in retrospect, it's like, I cannot say that I like Final Fantasy VII more than Shadow of the Colossus, but I've been stubborn, and so I always have two answers to that, where it's like, well, if I factor in nostalgia, my favorite is 7, but if my brain's talking here, it's clearly Shadow of the Colossus.
Yeah.
So I look forward to more people having that schism in their mind later on.
What about you guys? Want to sound off?
I'm with Hanson to a certain degree, I guess. Like, mine is Ocarina of Time, and that's because that, like Hanson with Final Fantasy VII, that was the first game that really like blew my mind. Like, I'd been playing games for a long time before Ocarina, but that was the first game that I just like stared at a television with my mouth wide open.
Right.
And like,
And then you turned it on.
and it will never be unseated. Just like, I feel like I work at Game Informer and write about video games because I felt so passionately in love with that game. But like every 2 through 10 or whatever is constantly shifting, and I feel like Portal 2 I would almost consider my number 2.
Okay,
and
sure.
like Limbo is a game that I put really high up there too, and those are like recent games that came out, you
Right,
know? But in
sure.
terms of like favorite of all time, it will always be Ocarina of Time because of that nostalgia and that initial experience that just will not be. I cannot recreate that. I'm always chasing that, but I will never be able to have that first experience with Ocarina of Time again.
Yeah.
Well, Cork, it's kind of like how you loved your second kid more than your first kid once he came out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was no contest. I love them both.
Sure.
Just want a little more. No. No, it's weird because honestly, I can't even, like, I couldn't tell you my favorite game anymore.
What?
I just have so many games that I like for different reasons that I guess if you ask me at gunpoint, I'll just spit up some arbitrary one from like the top of my head. Oh yeah, sure, it's Street Fighter 2. When it could just as easily have been like, oh yeah, Dead Rising, the first one, because they're kind of time and a place for me. So much
Sure.
of it's just your memory. Like, I remember like Dead Rising was great because it was something that I'd never seen before, and it was like, I didn't know I wanted this, and now that I see that it's here, this is amazing. Like,
Right.
all this time, yeah, and I'm sure that a game will come out in the future where it's like delivering something that I didn't know I wanted all this time.
Yeah.
But there's no one game that's like made you fall in love with video games.
No, because I mean, like Combat on the Atari 2600.
Yeah.
Because I could play against people and it was super
Yeah.
fun, and you could fly an airplane.
Well, what
or a
about
tank.
when you were playing Dead Rising for the first time, or like
Yeah.
a year after that game came out? Did you ever have the thought in your mind, like, this might be my favorite game of all time now? Or is it just, I really like that game? And then
I had the thought, but honestly, as I get older, I just don't feel as attached to like the importance of that question.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, I just
Well,
don't
you're really
know.
bumming everybody out. We just want you to answer the goddamn question.
Oh, here's Geometry Wars.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff Cork.
The tricky thing about this question and answering it is that you kind of have to answer the, like Jeff said, like, what's your favorite game of all time thing? And I've never really nailed that down, but it seems like it's usually a Resident Evil game. It's usually like Resident Evil 2 or the remake.
And
Usually.
what is it that you love about? No, I'm just joking.
Yeah, let's get into it. Basically, but like before that, it probably would have been like Sonic 3 and Knuckles. You know what I mean? And like, I know that wasn't actually that far away because that was like 94 or something like that. But yeah, wholesale, like Resident Evil replaced that kind of standing for me. And then, years later, then you have something like Mario Galaxy, which like, it's really close. And Mario Galaxy isn't that old anymore. And then, you do get into Last Generation, and I'd have a hard time telling you one that came close to matching my enthusiasm for, I guess that's weird because Wii is technically Last Generation, and it's just weird to think about. But, it's tough. Like Bloodborne, if I played it like a million times or something this year, then it would lead me to think that like, oh, maybe this is my new favorite game of all time. But
Really?
But the fact that I'm not like playing it just endlessly, that's to me, that's the sign that I may have a new favorite game of all time, is like
Sure.
playing it right away, right afterwards, puts it into like, all right, what's going on here?
Yeah.
I really only want to play this game. And then if you start playing it again and then you play it again before the end of that year, like it's going to be about the frequency of how often I play that game. I know there's some people that will say like Journey is my favorite game that I've ever played. And I wanted to play Journey once and it was cool. To me, it's instilled in how often I go back to it, and the fact that I've played that those games are older and I've had more opportunities to kind of go back to it over and over again just puts them at an advantage. But I'm not ruling it out at all.
Sure.
Games are just going to keep getting better. So
it's also harder to keep playing a game over and over again as you get older,
especially with our jobs, because we need to be playing a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So
the fact that I've played Tetris on my iPhone every day for the last 4 years, does that mean that Tetris is just my favorite game by default now?
kind of like, I think there's something to that too. Like Metallica is my favorite band, but
Sure.
not recently. They just put their time in, you know what I mean? Just like
Right.
Tetris did for you.
Yeah.
You should download Metallica Tetris, by the way.
Oh yeah, I've heard
Yeah,
good things. Yeah.
Tetris, I think it's pretty good.
I guess my favorite game then is the random solitaire game I downloaded for iPhone 6 years ago.
Really? You're like one of those dopes on a plane that I see playing
Yeah.
solitaire and want to slap the
No,
tablet
it's
out of
just
their
like
hand.
it's just like that mindless game, like Tetris for you probably. It's like, oh, I'll play solitaire for.
Yeah, but one's a masterpiece of game design. The other is a holdover that was installed on Windows 95.
Dopes on a plane. We have time for one more, you think?
Yeah, sure.
All right, so this is actually a kind of a Trojan horse question because there's a bunch of questions in here.
Sure.
Basically, these are like rapid fire questions about the podcast.
We're ready.
This is from Matt. Oh, and also thanks, Pat, for sending in question of the week, and we'll follow up with you. But thanks so much.
Number one question from Matt: what the hell have you done to my beloved podcast?
That's right. What did you do? Okay, so are all of the upcoming podcasts going to run around 2 hours? I've got no problem with this since I watched the whole thing and enjoyed all of it.
No, we do not have a set time in mind. We're going to try and keep it as short as we can while still having a thorough discussion. So, we're not gunning for any specific time, but I'd say longer than normal.
Right. Okay. Number 2. How long does it take to set up for the new show?
I don't know. It was a lot of prep time, I guess, but the
front.
production itself is not too hefty.
These things don't move anymore, so
That's right.
Yeah. With all the manpower it looks like this takes, what is your plan for E3?
We'll definitely do a Game Informer podcast from E3, which I'm looking forward to, but don't ask me about E3 plans yet. We're still trying to bake that out.
It's scary. Does Andrew Reiner plan to run for mayor? Yes.
Yes.
Number 5, do you ever plan to do a live stream version of your podcast, not a separate entity, but just a special episode or occasion?
It's an interesting idea. Maybe when we don't have a developer in the second half, which we're not always going to do a developer interview, but when we have a more like a topic or some sort of little game that we play in the second half, we could theoretically do that. But TBD.
Okay. Is Wade Wojcik behind the monitors during recording?
Yes, he is. He's in the control room right now, waving, and he's very pretty.
Or is Ben simply recording with multiple cameras simultaneously, then cutting the whole thing?
No, this guy's technical. No, we use our switchers, so we're switching on the fly.
This is technical. Will Game Informer hire another Matt in order to keep the status quo of people named Matt in the company?
No, we just bought a new doormat.
Oh, that's true. And also Matthew Broderick wasn't available, surprisingly. Number 8, regarding the format, will readers need to watch the video podcast in order to get the full experience of the Game Informer show? For example, would you show some gameplay footage and provide commentary like a play-by-play?
That is the reason I included this question in this mix. So this is a video podcast now. You can go on YouTube. You can watch it there or on Game Informer's site. We'll embed it in there. And so in the video version, we run footage of the games that we're talking about, but we'll never make it dependent on that video, even though Kyle just did when he said these aren't moving anymore.
Yeah, I pointed at things
So
behind
Kyle
me.
kind of broke the golden rule, but I want to keep it. If you like the audio version, God bless it. You can listen to the audio version. If you want to see some gameplay or look at our faces, that's just an option for you with the video. So hopefully nothing feels like it's changed just because there's cameras rolling on us right now.
And also, when like last week, we had Warren Spector on and
Right.
Skyped him in, so you're able to kind of get a look at him.
Sure.
So
Take a look at this guy.
Take a look at him. So yeah, that's it. Well, thanks, Matt, and thanks for all the questions.
Yeah, appreciate
We've
it.
been really impressed by the quality of them, but keep them coming.
Podcast at GameInformer.com. This email address
I
is
was
in
just
there
going to
too.
say that.
Perfect.
Just beat me to it. So you want to take us out, Ben?
Yeah, sure. Stay tuned for the next segment where we're going to be talking to someone you don't hear from too much, but he has an amazing perspective on Japanese game development and Western game development, but it's Dylan Cuthbert, so stick around for that. And welcome back to the Game Informer Show. We are honored in our second segment to have Dylan Cuthbert and Miguel Sanchez from Q Games. Welcome, guys.
Good morning. Good evening.
Yeah, it's a confusing thing. Those guys are actually in Kyoto, which is where Q Games is based. So thank you very much for lining up this crazy schedule to make this thing work.
No, not at all.
No, not at all.
Yeah, thanks for coming, guys.
Cool. So you guys right now are working on Tomorrow Children and Nom Nom Galaxy. Is that right?
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Cool. You want to just give us like the quick update on both those games?
Okay. Non Galaxy is in its final phase of early access before release, and we just released a major update for it, which has all kinds of stuff in there, and as a test for the final, the major final release. So, if people want to dive in now and actually still, get their last, words or advice or sort of words of wisdom into the game, then they should get in there now.
Sure.
It's all going to get locked down.
Now that game's about making soup, if I'm not mistaken.
In outer space, yes.
Okay, gotcha. Space soup. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, it's kind of like a sandbox style. I don't know like a simulation, maybe, where you are thrown onto a planet. You've got to dig out stuff, collect resources, build your base up, and basically create this intergalactic soup for a sort of corporate, sort of a galactic corporation that you're working for.
Sure. So you guys are well known for the PixelJunk series, and I know that this game started out being called PixelJunk Inc. Is it still under the PixelJunk branding, or what does that branding even mean at this point?
It's still PixelJunk, but the name got a bit longer, so we just dropped it from the initial title, that's all. So it's still in the logo. So basically, PixelJunk is basically the brand which sort of covers our sort of 2D, well, at the moment 2D at least, kind of indie style kind of, sort of our homebrew, I suppose, of video games.
So Tomorrow Children doesn't really fall into that camp?
Yeah, the Tomorrow Children, it still has all the same base ideas. We build everything around at Q Games, but it's a much bigger collaboration and with Sony. So it's also PS4 exclusive.
Oh, nice. So is Sony funding that game then, or how does that work?
Yeah, so for the Tomorrow Children, it's a full-on collaboration. So they're the publishers, and we're sort of a second-party developer.
Cool. So
but it's entirely our creation and our ideas, and we just don't listen to anybody else. We're making the game in the exact same way as we make all the PixelJunk titles.
Yeah, definitely.
But with a much bigger scope.
It seems like it shares some similarities with Non Galaxy in terms of just mining and kind of exploration, I guess, certain Minecraft roots in both games. Can you talk about like the comparison between the two?
Yeah, there definitely are some crossover elements. Although Non Galaxy is a little bit more, I don't know, zany maybe.
Yeah.
A little bit. But also because it's 2D, it changes the gameplay quite considerably. Whereas with the Tomorrow Children, it's more of a persistent world. So it's one of those games where you're going to want to log in every day and take part. And of course, it's online with with a lot of other players.
Right.
So I think that's a big difference between the two games. But there are a few common core elements, just simply because I like those kind of common elements. Things like collecting resources, building up bases, doing that kind of iterative kind of gameplay is something I really like.
And do you think that love of yours comes from games like Minecraft or like the RTS genre or
RTS?
Okay.
For Minecraft, I haven't actually. I've been too busy in the past few years to actually play it that much. So, and I can, so it's something that I know that if I played, I'd play for too long. So, I've tried to stay clear of it a little bit. But really, the roots all come from RTS for me. So, whereas Minecraft is more of a pure sandbox, I definitely want more of a strategy in the games I create. So I feel like I want to try and add a little bit more of that. Like, we're all working for some sort of goal, and we're trying to build up something part by part, basically.
Sure. So I know Monsters kind of got close to being an RTS, but have you guys ever thought about just making a full-fledged RTS?
Yeah, unfortunately, that genre has a lot of trouble, doesn't it? Because even EA cancelled, the latest was Command and Conquer, right?
Right.
And that's one of my favorite series of all time, so I was quite disappointed in that. So if EA can't find a large enough market to support it, then it's going to be pretty difficult for a smaller company like us to do it. But it's a genre I really love, so maybe all the RTS lovers out there can pool together and support RTS style games more. Maybe that will help.
It's just so tough. Oh, go ahead.
I'm trying to think back. So the first ever kind of RTS game that I ever played was a game called Carrier Command on the Amiga. This is way back in the 80s, so maybe 86, 87. And it was a 3D, it's a 3D full-on first-person RTS. It's quite amazing for the time. And in that game, that was the first game that I ever played where I looked up and it was like morning, it was like 6 a.m. in the morning. I thought, oh, I've actually played this all night. And I think that was where, I kind of bit the bug for RTS style games.
I think it's just so tough for the RTS genre to survive when you see MOBAs raking in millions, and it's kind of like the child that's grown to surpass their father, and now no one wants to go back to the father.
Yeah, but I just love it. I mean, Command and Conquer Generals is like one of my all-time most played ever games. Back in the early 2000s, I was just like every single day, at least 4 hours or 5 hours of that for about 2 years. So it's just an amazing genre, I think, in general. I'm really, with the Tomorrow Children, I'm really trying to bring a little bit of that into it. Not too strong though. So I'm trying to keep in mind, recent trends of gameplay a little bit. So I'm trying to bring in a bit of that with a bit of the sort of casual style play as well, a bit of the Minecraft style where, it's just free form sandbox kind of, with a little bit of smaller goals, I suppose. And I'm trying to meld all that together into this sort of crazy post-Soviet weird neo-future thing. So
yes,
when you think about it, it's almost like the players themselves are more like your traditional RTS units. Like you are the unit moving stuff, collecting, building, the things that you would delegate before you're actually.
And the player is like the idea of the player controlling it, the god kind of controlling it is like your collective mind, isn't it? In a way, it's like your collective,
the will of the people.
The will of the people,
like We Are Legion type situation. So something that's kind of curious about that to me. Tomorrow Children. It's sort of like you said, based on the old Soviet regime, and everyone's working for the greater good. And the harder you work, the more you'll get in return, and everyone has to sort of agree and vote on getting certain buildings and structures sort of built up. I'm wondering, are there any parallels between that sort of structure and game development that you've seen?
It's a little bit different, I think. I think game development wise, I think it's a lot more. I don't know what's the word,
directed.
I think the work is a lot harder.
All right,
that too.
No pickaxe. So you do have more pickaxes or no pickaxes?
Yeah, I think more pickaxes.
Okay, all right.
There's a lot of pickaxes around.
Yeah. A lot of hammers.
Okay.
But yeah, making a game is a pretty damn hard endeavor. Really, it looks pretty easy from the outside, but especially when you're making something this complex. I think smaller games it's not so hard, but a lot of people dismiss games like, say, Flappy Birds, for example, and they'll say, well, he knocked that up in a few hours or something. But if you play that as a game designer, you can see that there's actually a lot of fine control and a lot of fine tuning in there. Maybe he was lucky that he got it just right, but it's actually pretty, it's had a sort of honing performed on it. So. And a lot of people, you can tell by looking at the clones of the game, for example. You look at those, and most of them are just rubbish.
Right.
And it shows because they haven't seen where the hard work's gone in. They've just taken it at face value, and they think that's it. But making games and sort of honing them down and refining them is one of the hardest processes ever.
So Miguel, I'm curious, coming off of that, how you found the kind of early access environment on Steam.
It's really helpful to, reflecting, not just reflecting, but thinking about, as Dylan was just talking about, the balance aspect of the game. Because, as the game designer, you've got the thing that you want to do with the game, the thing that you want to realize, and, your vision for how it'll all play out. And, of course, you start working on it. And, we could play it in the office and be like, oh, this is perfect, this is great. And then we put it out on early access, and you've got 10 or 20 or 30 people like, what is this all about? How do you do this? Why can't I do this? This is what should be happening. What are you doing? Give me my money back. So, it doesn't get that bad. But
our fans are all very friendly.
Yeah, the important thing, you need that feedback. You need as many pairs of eyes, looking at it and actually experiencing it as you can get. And being on early access obviously gives you that ability. And, again, because the game itself, like, Num-Num's pretty crazy. So we can take a lot of that feedback and action it and try it out here. And then because it's on early access, we can push that back out. So it's a constant cycle of, getting the feedback, implementation, iteration, giving it back. And, as we listen to, the people playing and talk about it amongst ourselves, we're trying to get Num to be better and better, and ultimately to, the ultimate expression of both what we want and what the people playing, hope to get.
Sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, quite often when you're making a game these days, the game gets pretty big pretty quickly, and then you're trying to think up all these ideas, and you kind of have this idea of what you're aiming for, even what you think the player would really like, or but some of it is a bit of a sort of PR game in a way, because there might be a feature that initially a player might first see and kind of reject, because it's different, or it's or it makes the game a little bit harder in a certain way. But some of these changes are for a longer goal. So because it, like, for example, I mean, the first time anyone plays a game like Bloodborne, for example, I mean, they're just like, whoa, this is just so, I don't understand, no, and they throw the controller down. But it's like that at the beginning to make the ultimate, make the game ultimately like the best game you've ever played. Right. So, like Dark Souls as well. I mean, I'm a major fan of both, and it's like that in order to build up this tension in you as you play the game. And then when you get that release of the tension later in the game, it's like, wow, this is kind of like, I've never experienced any kind of like real emotion like this in a game before, and that's I think that's amazing. I think for Dark Souls and also for like Fallout 3 as well, I got a lot of that kind of feeling when I played those games. So initially, we have to be very careful when we listen to like the user's voice, and rather than take it as is, we kind of have to kind of filter it by one step and say like, well, what they're really saying is they have a problem with this bit. Sure. And it's not actually the solution. It's they have a problem with like understanding this one little core thing or something. And then sometimes we'll just react. I don't know, to exactly what they say. Sometimes. Yeah. But then other times we have to strategically change things in order to maintain the whole vision of the game.
So it's like we were talking about the Souls and From Software games. You've got almost a trinity of balance, instant gratification, and catharsis, and it's like you try to get all three of those, in the right amounts to get a really good game. And games like the Souls games have that.
It'd be a tough thing to try and focus test From Software's latest games. Like, I don't know how Sony balanced that with Bloodborne.
Like, how don't they just get QA'd into nothing, basically, and just all the corners get, like, sanded off?
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know, do you guys...
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Normally that happens, but I think, Miyazaki-san is a very strong personality. So I think, he probably reads the QA reports and goes, nope, not fixing that.
Have you guys ever interacted with Miyazaki?
Yeah, I've had dinner with him a few times.
Oh, nice. Is he a crazy genius, or how would you describe him?
He's a quiet genius in a way. He's a very nice guy. He's a very really is kind of in his own world. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. So talking about like the feedback thing, I just think of you guys releasing something like PixelJunk Eden, which is just awesome, such a unique experience. But like, if you released that as an early access game, do you think it would have changed a lot more with people complaining about, oh, this is too hard? Turns out falling to the bottom really sucks. Can we just get rid of that part?
Yeah. Well, with the Steam version of the game, we did actually address pretty much everything. So the problem was with Eden at the time as well, is that it was our third title in the PixelJunk series, and Monsters wasn't a hit at that point. So Monsters had just come out in the US and Europe. I think it came out like February, like probably the worst month to ever come out. And it looked like it was going to be doing well, but we couldn't really tell. And we didn't know, because it's all self-funded, we didn't know how much we could push the schedule out or anything. So we actually had to let money kind of fight with us a bit. on that title, which meant that really what we should have done nowadays, what I do is I would extend it, for another month or two and just kind of tidy up some of the rough edges and kind of, get that feedback going. But at the time we were a bit kind of on the edge of things. And of course, after we released, Monsters was like just growing and growing and growing. But it was like this real kind of sleeper hit for us. And even now it still sells pretty well. So Monsters is like the sort of the train that kept on going kind of thing. What's that phrase in America?
Yeah, you got it.
I think it's a
hype train, gravy train.
Yeah, I don't know, but it just kept on going. Yeah.
Sure. And you guys ended up making a Facebook version of that too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. Yeah.
How did that end up doing? I'm curious what you learned about that whole experience.
It taught us a lot about. We actually did it as an experiment into the free-to-play kind of world, the Facebook game kind of world, because we wanted to learn more about it, because we wanted to understand I wanted to understand the kind of the way of thinking, because it, everybody says how different it is, how it's more analytics based, and you've got to look at the data and all this kind of stuff. And I was quite interested in that side of things. So as a very small project for us internally, we just tried it out basically, and it got us to learn a lot about how servers are run, and how to keep those kind of games running, and it was very good feedback for us.
Sure. Are you interested in doing more free-to-play stuff in the future then?
We're thinking about it, I think the best thing we learned from that was the server side of stuff for the Tomorrow Children, because the Tomorrow Children uses a lot of, it's an online game, and we kind of took the ideas of not sort of the free-to-play ideas so much, but the asynchronous kind of loose connected play that you have in Facebook and on those sort of online games, and we kind of moved that. We took a lot of those ideas, mixed them with the sort of asynchronous kind of play you see in, say, Dark Souls, the sort of clever way they show other players, what they're doing and stuff like that. We kind of mixed the two and made it into a little bit more of a concrete kind of asynchronous game.
Okay. Can you explain what that actually looks like in Tomorrow Children then?
Yeah, so in the Tomorrow Children, so when you first go into a world, if nothing is happening, you don't see any other players. So that's the big difference. And then as players do things, they'll appear in your world and do whatever they're doing, and then disappear again. They kind of flit in and out of existence.
I think I saw some video of someone building a bridge and waiting for the bridge to be built, and every time they built a new block, that player would appear again as each block, and they were just kind of following them along.
Yeah. So that's what happens. So like if you like, the world is shared and all the objects are shared in the world. But when you pick up an object in the world, say you pick up like a lump of gold or something, you're taking that into your side of things, and then you disappear. So in your world, you're carrying it around, but they can't see you doing that, the other players. And then when you put it down again, they see you putting it down. So it's a very different take on multiplayer games. So in a regular multiplayer game, you've always got these, all these other people around you all the time. And for someone who's kind of a bit shy like me, apparently, then I get a bit kind of put off by that. So I don't really like playing multiplayer games that much when there's just loads of people, all around you. You kind of have to follow what they're doing. You always have to kind of base your play on what they're doing. Whereas in our game, what I did is I kind of distanced it from that a bit. So I wanted it to make a game where we have like a one-player kind of experience, like almost like a lonely experience. Like it's you in your world doing what you want to do kind of thing. And combining that with this sort of asynchronous idea to create like this shared world that everybody's in. And it's worked really well. So it means that people who have no interest in playing online, online in quotes, almost don't realize it is online and get sucked into it, which is great. And it's kind of similar in some ways, to some of the ideas in Dark Souls, where it's more limited in Dark Souls, because it's up to like one or two, or up to maybe 4 players, as a co-op kind of, or a, when you get invaded and stuff like that. But in our world, it's like 10s or 20. We're actually trying to decide the number of people that will go into the world, but as a balance issue kind of thing. So in each town, we're deciding how many people go in, but it's like a lot of people. It's like maybe 50 other players in the town with you, but you don't see them all the time.
Right.
So you still feel that sort of personal, like it's my game, feeling, and I think that's really important. You're not just taking part in this other world, like this other sort of like a hosted multiplayer game. It's your, it's running on your PS4.
Right.
It's your game. You can do whatever you want, and because of the loose interaction, you don't really have to care what the other players are doing most of the time. So,
do you think there are other lessons from the Dark Souls and Bloodborne games that developers maybe aren't taking to heart as much as you expected them to? For as much as people talk about those games, it's like maybe just the clear point is that not many people are just making kind of clones of them at this point. But do you think that like design lessons have seeped out from software recently?
I think so. I mean, it's a dangerous thing because there's a running joke in the industry at the moment, where you have your game design meeting and someone goes, "Well, in Bloodborne they did this, so we should do this." And I don't agree with copying it, verbatim and such, but it's definitely a lot of inspiration to be had, I think, because of the way they took online and turned it on its head a bit.
Sure.
Because if you compare it to other games, especially if you go all the way back to Demon's Souls, which is quite a few years ago now, if you compare it to other games at the time, no one really was doing anything like that with online. With online gaming, they kind of took the online idea and remolded it to be just what they wanted, and I think that's quite clever. Like I remember, one of my kind of like best moments in Dark Souls was when I was playing through his forest, and I was invaded in this forest, and by other humans, and I thought they were just kind of invading me, but then I got to the center of the forest, and there was this cat, and the NPC cat, and she gave me a ring and said, if you put this ring on, I'm going to summon you to kill all the human invaders coming into my forest. And for me, that was like wow, okay, so they took the stereotypical kind of like, matching gameplay that you normally see in a multiplayer game, and they have an NPC controlling it. And I thought, well, that's actually a really, an extra step beyond what everybody else was thinking at the time, where, years ago, a few years back, everybody was just thinking like, having a lobby, you just hook up with other people and you go in and you play a game.
Yeah.
This kind of turned it all on its head and made it much more real, I think. And I really like that kind of way of thinking, which is basically the Tomorrow Children is full of that kind of stuff. So it's like stuff where we haven't just done what people expect to be done. We've kind of pushed it a bit further and tried to find a way for you to play the game that is different to how you've played games before.
Definitely. So you talk about Miyazaki and some brilliant decisions he's made with the From Software team. I'm curious, because you've been in the industry for so long, are there other big figures out there that you really look up to on a design level that you don't think maybe get enough credit?
There's always the standards, I suppose, like Miyamoto and people like that. But there's people within Nintendo as well who are very, very clever.
Okay.
But you don't really see their names out there so much. You see some of them, like Aonuma-san, people like that. But
sure. But people like Tezuka, like not many people even know his name.
Exactly. Yeah. And he's a pretty interesting character. Very, very sort of soft, soft and cuddly.
Did you work with him quite a bit back in Nintendo?
I didn't work directly with Tezuka-san, but I know him very well. So
okay.
He's an interesting. It's kind of interesting because Miyamoto's kind of quite hard and direct, and Tezuka's kind of like soft and cuddly. They're kind of like a good combination.
Good cop, bad cop, I think they call it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is. It's exactly like that.
And you talk about like those unsung heroes within Nintendo. Is that just a matter of PR and just who's doing the interviews, or do you think that there's something within the culture of Nintendo where they don't like to kind of get out there too much?
Well, I think they're, at their hearts, they're kind of shy, nerdy types, so they don't really want to get out too much. Nintendo has a good record of getting most of their people out, though, and talking. Mm-hmm. So, everybody. If you think about it, there's a lot of quite famous Nintendo people really below Miyamoto. But it's just so many people in Nintendo that are good at what they do. So I think it's difficult to give everybody the limelight. Also, I remember I saw a YouTube talk of like a 2004 presentation by Jason Rubin, one where he kind of shouts a bit, but but he was talking about how the market, or I know the gamers themselves, and even like publishers and people like that, they need to have like a particular name that they can rally around, and it has to be like a personal name. And I was watching that YouTube presentation, and it really made a lot of sense. So like, he made the example of like the film industry, for example, like you'll go and see a movie because it's a Spielberg movie. But even though there's like 1,000 people working on that movie, you need that name, like a Kubrick movie or whatever it is. Even though it's not just his creation, it'll be the cinematographer, the director of photography, and all this, the actors, and I thought that was a very interesting side of things, which for the games industry we haven't really developed far enough yet.
I mean, there's like the Sid Meier's and Tim Schafer's, but was that kind of the idea behind the PixelJunk branding then, just to give some definitive name out there?
Yeah, exactly. And I tried. So we tried that. So I mean, I was trying that. So now I'm wondering what to do next, because with the PixelJunk branding as well, I think maybe if we'd have put like a name on there, it does not necessarily my name, but I mean just some like figurehead name on the game.
Miguel sounds good, I think, if you want to just go for that.
Yeah,
it's Sanchez.
Miguel Sanchez. Yeah. But it's basically that. I mean, it's funny. It was just interesting seeing that, and the recent thing with Kojima-san, of course, really accentuates that. I thought, and that's what made me remember about the 2004 talk by Jason Rubin, because it really it does touch on a few interesting things within the games industry. Right now, it's kind of going to a bit of a deeper subject here, but right now we're kind of we're still a bit like sort of the movie industry back in, say, the 40s or 50s.
Sure.
We haven't really pushed to the next step yet, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that, the next 10 or 20 years, how that develops.
Yeah, it is interesting just thinking about so many people connect the Metal Gear name with Kojima over Konami.
Oh, definitely.
It helps that it says a Hideo Kojima game several times in there, more than it's Konami branded in the opening sequence and stuff like that. And so it's just that Pavlovian reflex of like, well, quality equals Kojima. And if he's gone,
and also you see it a lot in the indie world. So, like Jonathan Blow, for example. So, you're probably going to buy The Witness not because of The Witness, but because Jonathan Blow is making it.
Right.
So it's a similar kind of power, I think, and it's interesting. I never really thought about it before, but with the whole Kojima thing, it really kind of brought it to the forefront, I think. And it's going to be, I think we might see more of that kind of branding.
Definitely. Is the Kojima thing, do you think, a bigger deal over in Japan? Is it a big discussion point amongst designers out there?
Oh yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
It's pretty huge news. We hear a lot of the gossip and stuff, which I'm not going to go into here, but but there's a lot of talk about Konami and Kojima and what really happened and all this kind of it's interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Do you want, just so our listeners can get a frame of reference, fairly lengthy or like deep in the interview, but just so they can have a frame of reference of your history with Nintendo and the type of games you've worked on? Can you just talk about like the early days of you collaborating with Nintendo?
Yeah, sure. So I first visited Nintendo in 1990, I think it was, because I'd made a 3D game, it was basically a sort of 3D game demo for the Game Boy while I was working at Argonaut Software. And Nintendo saw that, and the next week, because they didn't realize 3D could even be done on the Game Boy, they thought it was just going to be like basically like a NES, it'd be like a few sprites on the screen and people just doing simple games. And I got this wireframe kind of like full sort of shooting game going on the thing. And so a week later they flew us out to Kyoto.
To teach other developers there how you guys did it, or what was the goal?
No, just to sign a deal, basically. The first, it's like, wow, they've got 3D stuff going. let's fly them over and talk to them about, because they hadn't released the SNES at that point. They were still in development on the SNES. And Miyamoto, so what had happened is that Miyamoto was making Pilot's Wings, and they'd made this, or they got this sort of chip, sort of off the shelf DSP chip in there to help with the math in Pilot's Wings. I'm not sure if it really helped that much, but they the Pilot's Wings cartridge does have an extra DSP on it compared to the other cartridges of the time. And Miyamoto was like frustrated with it because he couldn't rotate the plane in all the directions it can go in without drawing all the frames of the sprite, right? All the different angles, and there were so many different angles that they couldn't, they just couldn't do it. And so when he saw that we got 3D running on the Game Boy and also we'd also got it running on the NES, because we didn't have a SNES at the time, so we got it running on the NES as well.
Really? Wow.
So it's pretty. The NES only had 1K of available memory of RAM, and we managed to get 3D running on it. It was quite a remarkable feat. So because we had those two things, and they said, well, the NES, we're finished with the NES for the time being. Now it's all SNES, and we want to do this kind of 3D on the SNES. And like Jez San, my boss at the time, the head of Argonaut, he says, "Oh, I have a friend in England who can make chips." It was as simple as that. And he, in the meeting, he got up from the meeting and said, "I'm going to call him now." And he went to the phone in the corner of the meeting room. This in front of there's maybe 20 Nintendo people on the other side of the, like Miyamoto and Yokoi, and Yamauchi wasn't there. He never really took part in those kind of meetings, but or just basically all on the other side. And he just went over to the corner, called up a guy called Ben Cheese, who had just been developing chips and sort of DSP chips and all that kind of thing for an obsolete console, a console that didn't come out in England called the Conix Multisystem. That's a bit of historic trivia. But there was this console that was being made in the UK called, it was pretty good, and I worked on that bit. But this guy had been involved in the chipset on that. And so Jez-san called him up and said, I'm at Nintendo in Kyoto. Can you make a 3D chip for the Super Nintendo? And the guy goes, well, maybe. So Jez goes, yes, he can.
Holy cow.
And we went back to the meeting, and then, that was it. They signed up Argonaut for like 3 games and to work on the chip. So for the chip and 3 games, basically.
And then you started working on Star Fox at that point?
So that Star Fox was later on. So initially, we were just developing like a 3D engine and some gameplay to run on the FX chip as it was being developed. And then when the FX chip got to the point where it could be properly developed on, this is almost like a year and a half later. I think it's about a year and a half later. That's when the Star Fox project started. So it started at the end of 91. And that's when we actually got stuff running on the FX chip. And then Miyamoto, we were doing like a sort of all roaming kind of 3D shooting game based on the Star Glider series that Argonaut had made in the past. Miyamoto saw that and said, well, this is kind of rubbish, in his own words. Let me have a think about it. And so we went back to England over Christmas and New Year at the end of 91. And we came back in January, like the 2nd or 3rd week of January, I think it was. And we arrived, and Miyamoto-san said, well, over the New Year, I went to the Fushimi Inari Shrine, which is the local Fox shrine to where Nintendo was at the time. And as I was walking through these, they have like these 1,000 vermilion gates, red-colored gates that go up the mountain. It's an amazing place. And he said, as I was walking through these gates, I imagined what it'd be like if I was a spaceship. And while you were gone, I got one of my programmers here just to knock up a very simple demo. And they basically, when they say simple demo, they mean very simple. They had like 3 objects, and the camera just moved forward. And there was the one object that was like a tunnel shape. And he goes, this is what we'll base the game on. And so then what we did is we basically threw out all the old Star Glider style kind of roaming, kind of, all 360-degree type stuff. and we made, we built it around this on rail, flying through tunnels type of game, and it worked really well, and it worked very well to the limitations of the hardware at the time, because obviously, if you're only making a game that goes forward and you have limited power, it means you can put all the power in front of the camera. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you've got a 360-degree game, you've also considered stuff that's outside of the view.
Sure.
And so it's one of the very clever things that Miyamoto really thought about, because he always thinks about the technical limitations when he designs a game. And that kind of helps mold the game in a particular direction. And in this case, it molded it into Star Fox.
Definitely. What was it like being internal at Nintendo during that period in the early 90s? Was it just basically cubicles? It's like the peak of game creativity in so many people's minds. And I'm curious, like, what the atmosphere was like. Could you feel the creative juices flowing everywhere?
Yeah, probably late 80s, early 90s, everywhere was pretty much like that. But at Nintendo, it's a little bit sterile as an environment, because it's just all like white walls and sort of polished floors, and everything a bit kind of bland. Sure. Whereas where I'd started making games, in my bedroom in the UK, and Argonaut was just like pretty much like an old warehouse, and kind of had a bit of flavor to it, I suppose. So going to Nintendo and working directly within their walls was suddenly very much a corporate experience, I suppose. And for me, that was a bit of a shock. But the people that were in there, at that time, EAD only had about, maybe 30 people, in total, in Miyamoto's department, who were actually involved in actually making the games. There's a few office sort of administrator type people, and the people are just really very creative, very bubbly, I suppose, very very enthusiastic, very get up and go. There was no kind of feel that there was no real pressure back then to be making games that sell multi-millions. I think there's a lot more of that now, but back then it was more like just making games that were very interesting. And so Star Fox was one of those. It was like an experimental. But if you look at that time, Nintendo made lots of very experimental type games. Because the next FX chip game, Wild Tracks, I think was it?
Stunt Race FX.
Stunt Race FX, was that the name in America? I can't remember. Wow. And the name was a bit different, I think. But that was just a very experimental thing, and I think that was really good for them back then. So it was very hungry, I suppose. It was a very hungry period. So everybody was they had one person would have many hats on.
Sure.
So for example, in when we were making Star Fox, I was designing bosses to go into it. I was actually writing sort of the tools as well. So the linker and the assembler and stuff like that. I was also doing helping the guy record voices and stuff for the game, and also I even animated a couple of the models in the game. So not very well.
Which ones do you remember?
If you look for the worst animated ones, they'll be me.
Okay.
But it was just fun, So there was people weren't too fussed, and everybody just got into it and just did everything that was needed to be done.
Definitely.
There was not so much of the ultra sort of specialization that you see nowadays in bigger teams. It was a small team. It was just 3 programmers.
Oh wow.
So with Star Fox, it was written purely in machine code. 3 main. We had 2 coders back in the UK who were the FX chip developers. So they'd made a very sort of bare bones kind of 3D engine, very simple. And then it was up to us to kind of take that, modify it, fix it up, and make it run as a game, run as a game engine kind of thing.
Sure.
So there was 3 programmers. Eguchi-san was a director, who's quite famous now for his Animal Crossing series.
Sure.
And there was Yamada-san, and there was a couple of other. There's one 3D artist and one kind of tool guy for the 3D modeler that they had. They had a very simple 3D modeling tool that actually ran on the Super Nintendo, which is pretty interesting. So it was that small. It was like, maybe 8 of us,
Oh, that's
total,
mind-boggling.
probably including Miyamoto as well. So
Sure. So now that you're running Q Games and you've been running the studio for quite a while, I'm curious if there's some mystery when you look back at Nintendo that you're trying to emulate still, just as far as creative leadership or like a certain bar of quality. Like, what's the biggest mystery to you still about Nintendo?
yeah, definitely. I try to emulate the things I saw and learned back then, because it really was like one of the most creative environments that I've been in. I'm not sure if it's as creative now because it's a lot bigger.
Sure.
But back then it was definitely very creative. And I think one of the things that always impressed me back then was the ability for Miyamoto to and others there to detach themselves from particular things in the game that maybe they really liked even, but they could detach themselves from it enough to actually decide, okay, actually we shouldn't put this in the game, even though we like it. This shouldn't go in. And so the ability to use scissors like that, I always called it, at the time I kind of called it like, designing with scissors. Rather than build a game from nothing, they kind of start with the block of granite and then chip it down kind of thing and remove stuff to make the game, which is a pretty interesting approach. Right now I kind of try and do both, but so you kind of build it up and then you knock it down kind of thing.
Sure. And
I think that's pretty much what they do nowadays now as well. But the kind of the ability to do that and to have that kind of leap of logic at times where, Miyamoto-san, he'll be playing a game, playing the game, and or whatever game he's working on at the time, and he'll just go, well, that's good, but it's not, let's just remove that, and why don't you do this instead? And then the idea that's instead is like a twisted, distorted version of some of the ideas that are already being played with, but kind of all, I know, like distilled, and made into this very cool idea. So I think that's a very important skill that, a lot of game designers really still need to learn, including myself. So
sure. Interesting. So in the Iwata asks for like Star Fox 64 and 3DS, which you guys helped create alongside Nintendo, is that correct? Yeah. But in that, it was talking about, you mentioned that like you helped teach Miyamoto English and he helped teach you Japanese at the time.
Yeah. So in those days, the Miyamoto-san hadn't really had much contact with the sort of the English-speaking world, but he had a very strong interest in it, as most Japanese people do, in the Western world. And he was a massive fan of like Disney. He still is, and like Mickey Mouse and characters like that. And he just wanted to learn more and like be able to converse in English. So we ended up, while we were making Star Fox, we ended up going to lunch like every single day for like, it must be like, for the 8 months or so that it took to develop the main parts of the game kind of thing. And, there's this little local restaurant lunch place that he would go to without fail every single lunchtime. So he'd take us along there, and it was called Tommy Mass, by the way. And he just like basically just talk, and try to learn new phrases that, he was learning by himself as well. So, he'd ask about a particular word or something that he'd read and wanted to know more about the nuance of it and stuff like that. And at the same time, we'd try and learn Japanese from him.
Sure.
So it was a very sort of give and take, a bit of an exchange.
Definitely. I mean, are you at a level now where you can call up Miyamoto and go out for a beer or go over to his house and play some games? Like, what's the relationship now? How social is that guy?
I think as he's got older, and also as Nintendo's got bigger, it's a bit harder to like just call him up. But every now and then I can, not so much recently, but because we're pretty much Sony based, so
sure.
that kind of he's a bit on guard because of that. But every now and then we'll bump into each other.
Definitely.
He doesn't drink though, so you can't go for a beer.
Interesting. Okay. So with Star Fox on the Wii U coming out, I mean, was there a part of you guys that wanted to work on that project?
Which one? Sorry, the
Wii U Star Fox that's coming out this year.
Kind of. I don't know. I mean, I've made 4. Is it 4? 4 Star Foxes, including Star Fox 2.
Sure.
So,
which was canceled,
I wasn't
by the way.
too bothered about making another one.
Sure.
Soon. And also, I mean, one of the things is with the Star Fox series, it has a lot of pressure involved where you can't be as creative as you want to be. And Nintendo feel that, get into that a little bit as well, where, they can't be quite as outrageous as they want to be with it because people have this very, kind of strong view of like what it is. Because it's so, because it's a strong franchise.
Sure.
But it does make it a little bit difficult to expand beyond that. I mean, Nintendo always get that for all their titles. Like, when what was the Zelda with the cartoon look?
Wind Waker.
Wind Waker, yeah.
Right.
And it was amazing. You look back at it now, it's great. It's
it holds up so much better than the other Zeldas at the time. Yeah.
Exactly. But everybody complained about it at the time, and I didn't understand why. I couldn't understand why, but people just love their game. So it can't be helped. But it is one of those things. So as a creator, unless I was going to get full control of what to do with Star Fox, I'm not that interested in making another one. I mean, it's not that I don't want to disappoint people, but but I just like, I think even when we were making Star Fox Command, I felt that we were trying to take all these ideas that we'd had for Star Fox 2, and because it's Miyamoto's design sort of his main direction for that game for Star Fox Command was let's take those ideas that we had from Star Fox 2 and let's do them again. Let's make it work, on the DS, with the touch screen and everything. It can be done. And so I think that's what we tried to do with that game. But we still got these vocal people who said, "Oh, but everything we need the stages that are on rails, and stuff like this." And I said, "Well, we were trying to do, we're trying to expand the universe a bit, expand the gameplay a little bit, do something that's a bit different, kind of what we do with the PixelJunk series actually, but." We try and do things a little bit different, just to push expectations a little bit away from the norm. And I think even now, if you go back to Star Fox Command, it does. I think Star Fox Command also stands the test of time pretty well. I think it's got a very original game underneath it. I think it just got overlooked a bit because it didn't have the rails.
Right.
It's interesting to see that even though you don't have any involvement in the new Star Fox for the Wii U, that there's so many ideas from Star Fox 2, which never saw the light of day, still kind of going into that because, I played Star Fox Wii U at E3 when it was announced, and, you're morphing into different vehicles. You are on the ground now. You're flying in, 360 degrees, and I understand those were some of the ideas that you were working on with Star Fox 2. So even though you're doing everything, all the ambitious projects you guys are doing at Q Games, your influence is still there, and your thumbprint is still there. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I think Miyamoto-san also really just wanted to get those ideas that are in Star Fox 2. He wants to get them out more into the world because there was some pretty unique stuff, especially for the time. So I think that the fact that we couldn't release that game because of just the speed of console development, because of the PlayStation and Saturn came out and everything was just moving so quickly back then, and suddenly Nintendo had a new rival on the block, and they couldn't be seen to be like lesser than that, So that's why they cancelled it because basically they couldn't release a 3D game on the Super Nintendo because it would be a lesser quality than say any PlayStation 1 game, for example, at the time.
Sure.
And so and they had a very strong rivalry with Sony because of the whole CD thing.
Right. Where Sony was originally going to make the CD part for the Super Nintendo, and then kind of branched out and made it into PlayStation.
There's a lot of even now, I think there's a lot of rivalry just because of that.
Sure.
Well, and God forbid that Star Fox 2 be compared to Warhawk or Knights or something like that.
Oh,
so,
exactly. Yeah. So I think that he just really wanted to get those ideas out, and the fact he had to actually stop that game was very frustrating for him.
Yeah,
frustrating for all of us. But I mean, it couldn't be helped. I mean, it's just that's the market at the time.
Yeah. Definitely.
So I think that moving forward, I think seeing some of those ideas in the Wii U version will be good. I think.
Yeah, definitely. So just to close things out, I'll let you guys actually get to your workday in Japan there. You want to talk a little bit about Bit Summit and what that event is and how you guys are involved and what's planned for this year?
Okay, so this year is the third year of Bit Summit. We started it a couple of years ago when James Milkey, who used to work here as a producer, he sort of came to me and said, you know what, I want to start an independent game summit type thing. Because I think there's a lot of a lot of Japanese sort of indie devs that the Western world doesn't see, and so they have this image of like Japanese game dev that comes from the Tokyo Game Show, which, and the Tokyo Game Show is just not that interesting. It's just big publishers showing, with there's no like direct connection there at all. It's just like big publishers showing their games. And recently, I mean, there's a few more. They've tried to do a bit more with the indie stuff, but what we wanted to do was make more of a sort of PAX style event, or more like the indie mega booth even kind of event, where the actual developers are there, showing their games. The indies are there, and semi-indies or whoever, just people who are just really into gaming and want to make games, are actually there, and they show their stuff, and the public can actually see the games and interact with them, and interact with the people who are making them, maybe inspire them to make games, that kind of thing. And so I heard that, and I said, well, yeah, as long as it doesn't cost us too much. And so I gave him the go-ahead to do that, and we started developing, and it started taking up more and more people within Q Games. And so the first one was, we booked the largest place we could afford, and it was packed out. Like, we were amazed, it was like, totally packed. And there were just so many interesting games on display that it just got everybody excited, and even kicked off a load of people who suddenly realized, oh, wow, this is actually a thing in Japan, so we can actually be indie in Japan. We can actually do our own thing, and we can actually exist like that, and they thought it was only an American thing, or a UK thing. Well, I think it's primarily like an American kind of thing, really. And I think that kicked it all off. And just the second year, we booked an even bigger venue and got even more developers involved. We had, big sort of sponsors showing off their indie stuff. Sony, had a little booth with like just their indie games on it. And like Microsoft were there, and Epic were showing the Unreal Engine and stuff like that. And then we had like talks, and we had live music and all this kind of stuff going on. And it was just a really incredible experience. And so this year, we're running a few months later than we normally would. So it's going to be in July, I think 10th and 11th, I think. I think the 10th and 11th of July, or 11th to 12th, somewhere around there. So that weekend. And this year it's going to be an even more amazing event, I think, because we actually, Kelly, from the Indie Mega Booth reached out to us and said, can we collaborate in some way? Because she'd looked at like the Tokyo Game Show, and she was like, well, that's not really like a PAX event. That's more like a E3 kind of but a smaller kind of E3, not a very good E3 in that sense. And so she said, what we'd like to do is put our booth into the Bit Summit event. And so we started talking about that, and then things started rolling, and so that's all going ahead. So it's going to be pretty damn amazing, I think. It's going to be their first time in Japan. So you're going to have the Indie Mega booth in Japan. It's going to be in Kyoto, and people should, if they're going to come to Japan anytime, they should come for that. I think it's a lot more interesting than the Tokyo Game Show. I think.
Yeah.
It doesn't take
it's
much
just
to get there, so that's good. I mean, not to Japan, but it doesn't take much to get more interesting than TGS. So there's a low bar to beat, but it sounds super entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, Tokyo Game Show, it has more of an anime side maybe to it all.
Sure.
So it's like more of a. So if you go on the public days, you get all the cosplay and all that kind of stuff. So I mean, there is a cultural thing that is interesting there to look at, but for what we were looking for was more like, these are the developers having fun, showing off their games directly. And it just feels so much better. It feels like it's for us.
Yeah, definitely. Great. Well, I think we've taken enough of your time, but thank you so much, Miguel.
It was fun talking.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's fun talking to
we'd
you.
love to talk to you again in the future sometime. But thank you so much, and thank you for watching or listening to the Game Informer show. Be sure to send your feedback to podcast@gameinformer.com, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.